Hey guys, tonight we awake within a bedroom so frigid you can view your own respiration, but do not you dare shudder too noisily. The wall covering is stripping just a tad. In the nooks the panes are laced with ice, so dense it appears the glass has gone sightless. And your waistpot sits frozen hard beneath the cot. Welcome to wintertime in the Victorian age. You are not solo, really. You are in fine company with tons of Londoners who went to rest sporting mittens, mufflers, and at times even their shoes, just to get through the night and the sunrise. Oh, it starts with a trial not of power, but of conduct. The initial task is tearing yourself from a bed tick as rigid as cured meat. But there is no thrashing or groaning permitted. You have to stand with style, your exhalation twisting like smoke in the air, and start the day's tiny habits with all the peace of a royal drinking brew. Never mind that your digits have gone unfeeling. You grab for your robe, hard from the nip, and drag it on atop your sleep shirt. Heaven forbid your ankles be revealed. Decency never takes a winter vacation. You shuffle over to the bowl, which has a fancy jug of fluid sitting atop it. Lovely, yet frozen. Yes, the water has turned into a tiny ice rink. Still, manners say you ought to clean your visage. And so, with shaking palms, you crack the surface like a starving bird digging for meal. Splash a few dagger-cold beads onto your cheeks and attempt not to cry out. Behind you, somebody taps gently. Likely your servant, bringing in a tepid mug of leaf water and a rag heated barely by the stove hearth. She does not chat. It would not be right at this time. Plus her breath clouds the space between you like a mystery, and you both know you are not to sight the chill. You sit at your tiny scribing desk, looking at the frost-coated panes. Outside, it is all stack smoke and grey mush. Inside, there is the beating of the timer and the soft hum of tolerance. You start your morning note, yes, with your mittens still on. The fluid solidifies if you wait, so you script fast, the tips scraping on the sheet like a small, hopeless beast digging at freedom. Your ideas drift to the living room downstairs, still dim and icy. You will be let in there soon, but not yet. Not before the logs are lit and the chairs fixed according to unseen laws. You are not the head or lady of the home after all. You are junior. That means you wait your turn for the heat, the oatmeal even, for your shoes to be heated. You recall last year's error when you donned wet shoes straight from the rug and spent the day wheezing, not from sickness, but from guilt. No one speaks a phrase when you cough at the morning table, but the quiet is crushing. There is a ranking of heat in this home, and you, dear hearer, are squarely in the bottom grades. But chin up. You are permitted to warm your palms at the corridor gas sconce, if you're fast, and if no one spots you, that is something. And now the chime. Breakfast is prepared. You take one final look in the glass, viewing your image shiver back at you. But recall, stance is everything. A curved spine welcomes rumours. A strong jaw and fine mittens mask many faults, covering the fact that you have not washed in 3 days because, bluntly, the water has been solid as rock. All right, before you get too snug, go ahead and hit that like icon and join us. But only if your spirit agrees. And tell me, where are you tuning in from and what hour is it over there? Lower the lamps, get that blower going for some ambient mood, and let us relax into tonight's tiny journey. The trip to breakfast is a daily mission. You step carefully down the thin steps, palm grazing the side for support, not because you are shaky, but because the timber rail is too icy to hold without gloves. Below, the atmosphere thickens with the scent of ember smoke and cooked grains. It is not bad exactly, just dense, a memory that heat, like everything else here, must be gained. In the dining hall, the glass is lined with ice, sifting in a dim glow that makes everything appear like it has been rolled in dust. Your elder relative sits nearest the hearth. Naturally, he is the oldest male, and thus nearest to the blaze. You take your spot down the board far enough off that the heat does not quite touch you. Your respiration still blows in tiny puffs over your drink cup. Talk is scarce. The laws of morning eating are rigid, no griping about the nip, no sniffling either. It is deemed crude. If your nose is leaking, you manage it quietly with a fancy tissue and a carefully timed shift of the skull. Your aunt once noted that a real woman can outlast a storm with nothing but poised fabric. A helper walks in with the grains, tepid as usual. He tries to hide a hack, but you see everyone does. Yet no one speaks a phrase. To note it would be rude, and to spot sickness at the board is almost as bad as bringing it in the first place. Instead, you quietly mix a scoop of preserve into your dish, watching it settle like jewels on grey glue. Wealth in tiny bits. Your brain drifts to the gossip. Mrs. Ellingsworth down the road allegedly paid a coal lad just to heat the footstools before folks came. Shocking and smart. Your own family would never sink to such deeds. Not openly, at least. Manners, after all, is often just well-practiced denial. Everyone is frozen. No one says it. You remove yourself after the food with a soft dip and go back to the sitting room. It is still chilly, but at least the logs have been urged into a shy shine. You crowd near it, hands out, spine vertical. You think wistfully of the famous Lady Moulton, who, per family tales, once donned a fur-lined skirt so dense she passed out at chapel. Everyone spoke about her modesty, but privately they liked her skill. A tap at the main gate snaps your ideas. It is the dairy delivery kid? Face raw, red eyes dripping. The houseman takes the goods with pinchers, not because of bugs, but because though those are dreaded, but because holding wet glass in this climate can strip the hide from your digits. The lad dips, then vanishes into the mist. You stay by the glow a second more, then stand to get your writing case. You have notes to mail, and every packet must be flawlessly folded, each edge straight. Messiness suggests chaos, and chaos hints at a fall. And in a season like this, a fall is nearer than it appears. The chill has its own codes, slow, sneaking, unseen. It strips colour from sides, drains fluid from quills, and if you are not wary, it strips away politeness too. But not you. You fix your wrap snugger, fix your stance, and march out of the chamber as though your joints are not banging together. Under 3 levels of fleece, you have a lengthy day ahead. Levels to keep, looks to build, and above all, the laws of winter manners to obey. Because in the Victorian globe, making it through the nip was not just about timber. It was about never letting anyone spot you shake. You go down the steps again a few hours later, this time with your mittens rightly closed and a well-honed vibe of unconcern to the frost. The family has heated by a notch or two. Someone must have paid the kitchen girl to keep the stove gates pushed wide. But your snout still feels like it pertains to someone else. You float toward the parlour, pulled by the slight vow of warmth and the even slighter odds of sitting near the flame. Ah, but here is where the true matches start. The hearth is the chair of the Victorian home in winter, and like all chairs, it arrives with a stern and unseen pecking list. Who secures the hottest patch? Not the freshest, not the nicest, not the coldest. The reply lies in a deep math of social grade, sex, wedding status, years, and whose ailment is acting up that sunrise. You walk in and instantly sweep the area. 3 seats set in a slight curve around the blaze. The middle seat, nearest to the logs, is already taken by your matriarch, who has not stirred since dawn. She's wrapped in a knee rug the scale of a boat sheet and clutching a half-drained cup like it is a sacred prize. She does not chat, but her being is guarded. That seat is hers. It has always been hers. It may be hers even after she passes. To her right, your relative is faking to view a paper while stopping the warmth with both joints and a stretched shoe. He looks at you, gives no sign of greeting. To her left, the spot is open, but you would not try. That is your dad's patch, and he's due home from his stroll any second now. It would be a hushed drama to rest there, the sort that ends up in someone's journal. You take a stance on the sofa near the pane, where the breeze waves the curtains just enough to make your digits throb. This you know, is your spot in the home's heat ranking, someplace between vaguely allowed and totally lost. The codes are old and voiced by none, but they mould your day. You cannot beg to rest nearer to the blaze. That would hint at rights. Instead, you must pause until someone departs, ideally due to pressing tasks or demise. Until then, you grin and last. You make tiny chat about the sky as if it were not trying to end you, and you push your feet under your dress to halt the stinging. The fire itself is a live thing. Its heat is not fair. It spreads oddly, strangely, picking pets. You view a wood piece move in the rack, shooting a rain of lights up the pipe, and feel an almost holy envy toward the house feline who has been gifted a patch right on the rug. She extends richly, rear shaking, and you vow she grins. There was a story once, maybe fake, of a calling man who, missing the sitting plan, dropped himself in the matriarch's seat. He was never asked back. In truth, the next holiday someone shipped him a hand-sewn pad that read, "Know your rank." It is a gag, sure, but it is not comical. Your sibling comes in, slightly red from the nip, and views the seating like a game board. She picks the key bench, bold but far. You dip in unity. There is no point battling the flame's court. You are not among its pets, not yet. You try not to stare at the blaze too long. It feels like wanting, and wanting is not fitting, so instead you inspect the space. The wallpaper, once a happy bloom, is muted to a type of winter tan. A metal rock bucket sits beside the fire, banged from years of work, its dark load shrinking like the home funds. You have heard hints that rock shipments are getting more costly and that your dad now stores the finest chunks in a sealed basement box tagged "Private Sitting Room Use Only." You ponder what would occur if you brought it up. Shall I get another scoop for the blaze, father? No, that would hint the current fire is lacking, and that is not your rank to voice. You are not the flame guard, nor the flame judge. You are a viewer in the heat politics of this house. If you sense chill, the right answer is to seem keen on the scene, or needlework, or a text you cannot quite grip steady because your digits have gone rigid. The fire pops. It almost sounds like giggling. Your relative finally walks in, banging ice off his shoes and beaming the proud heat of someone who has just come from outdoors and wants you to ask about it. He says brisk, out there with the loose threat of someone who knows he will get the footrest. You grin nicely and move your joints aside. He takes his spot, even against the fires, rubbing his palms with acted joy. They say it might ice the tubes this week, he adds a tad too happily. Could make for a bold Sunday wash. There is that term again. Wash. You swap looks with your sibling. If the tubes do ice, it means the metal tub baths will be pulled out and filled, pot by pot, from the stove. A task so lengthy and low it becomes a public deed, even when done in quiet. That is for another date, though. Right now there is only this space, this blaze, and the habit of taking turns faking not to mind where you rest. Your matriarch clears her pipe. Everyone stops. She slowly, pointedly drops her cup to its plate and rises slowly, squeaking like an old plank. The room stares in deep quiet. She drags toward the corridor without a phrase. The seat is vacant. Your dad is not back yet. Your relative is briefly drawn by the feline now trying to scratch a free string on his hose. There is a 2-second gap of chance, 3 at most. You stand. Not too fast. That would be crude, but with trust, as if it is the most normal move in the earth. You drift toward the seat and drop yourself with all the style of a bird landing on a lake, fixing your dress and gloved palms with army strictness. You sense it the second you rest, the glowing heat soaking through the pad, the warmth twisting around your back like a gem. No one speaks a phrase. No one needs to. You have done it rightly. No errors, no lifted brows. And for the first time today, you sense heat not just on your hide, but in your frame. A win. The fire snaps with praise. You look toward the pane, where flakes start to float past in slow loops. Outdoors, the globe is frozen hard, but inside you found your spot. Just for now, until someone more senior returns. You are called next to the upper changing room, where the true stage of winter rank starts. Getting clad not merely for use and surely not for ease, but for look, decency, and that ever-enduring ghost called rightness. You stand stiff in your slip, arms half up, while your helper lays out the day's tiers like a chief setting the war zone. First the cotton base, itchy, yes, but unseen. Then the shirt. Then the binds tug tight until your sides object. That is the base. Now comes the stacking. Stack upon stack of fabric, clasp, trim and fleece, each telling a tale not just of heat, but of cash. You eye the pile with quiet fear. A smart winter outfit in Victorian England means at least 5 main tiers from shoulder to boot. The saying decked out completely may as well have been made for this habit. Every piece must match to your social place, your clan's luck and your private merit, all while faking you just happen to toss it on. Your outer frock is a tough slate, grey with a humble bump and full arms lined in dog fur. A pass down from your aunt and just enough pelt to hint we are not poor yet. Over it goes a dense fleece cape dyed deep jar green, then mittens, then a hat, which must sit at strictly the right tilt or risk making you appear like a rural relative. Finally, the shoes, lined in fuzz, clasped up the flank, horribly rigid. You have heard of one gal who wore loose shoes and passed out at the bread shop, from nip and guilt. You wonder at times if it is fake, but you are not keen to find out. The fact is, in this world, clothing is a dialect. The snip of your arm, the feel of your mittens, the tiny soft band at your neck, all chat fluently of where you fit, or worse, where you fake to belong. A gal in last year's trends might as well don a sign that reads social fall pending. You recall last month's call to the Addlestones, when Mrs. Addleston wore a soft walking gown indoors. Your mom hissed later, if you need to wear soft cloth to stay warm, maybe stay in bunk. The laws are firm as rib binds and just as hard. Your helper, to her merit, says zip about the dimming edge or the fixed glove inside. She has her own rule to heed. Tidy locks, dipped crown, no talk unless asked straight. She aids to clip your neck in place, then steps back. You are set, miss. You nod, even though you feel like a fluff-filled doll. But now comes the truly vital part, the show. Going down into public sight while fully clad is like walking onto a set. You stop at the peak of the stairwell, take a calming breath and drift downward, hoping your shoes do not squeak. In the sitting room, your kin looks up briefly. No praise, of course. This is not a dance. But someone's gaze hangs half a second too long on your cape and you feel the spark of joy. Note received. You are warm enough, decent enough for today. You take your chair near the flank pane, still not fire close, but at least out of the worst of the flows, and start the next exam of winter manners. Tolerance. Without moving, the fleece is already stinging at your wrists. The binds press a flat pain against your sides, and your shoes are starting their slow attack on your joints. But to fix any of it openly would be a flop. Moving in your chair hints at pain, pain hints at poor stock, and that, well, that is basically a drama. Across the space, your cousin Agatha enters in a dark red fleece dress with pale trim and pelt ends. She has made a daring play today. No rap. You can sense the wave of notice. No one says it loud, but everyone is guessing the same fact. Is her room better heated, or is this simply pride? Dressed in guts, your aunt eyes her up and down, then returns to her sewing with the icy skill of someone who will be citing it in a note by dusk. Agatha takes off her mittens, slowly. The inside fabric peeks out. Silk. A hushed wealth. She puts them palm up on the end desk, a fine move only doable through endless work. The mittens are not wet, which suggests her cart was warmed before showing up. You take heed. Everyone does. You smooth your dress. Not too fast, not too much. It is times like this you see winter gear in your sphere is a type of shell. But not for battle, for viewing. You are seen before you are chatted to, judged, before you are heard, and nowhere is this truer than in the feared deed of removal. To take off a glove, a hat, even a single clip from your wrap must be done with timing and grace. Take off too soon and you are seen as rash. Take off too late and you are crude, making everyone else uneasy by clinging onto your outer items as if you might run at any second. The right second to undo your cape is somewhere between the second and third mug of brew, when at least one other lady has done so first, and even then, never fully. A half-open cape shows you are both calm and held. It is a dialect of cloth and pause. You recall an older gal years back who came to a party and took off her top skirt before her mittens. The room went quiet. An older man hacked, someone dropped a utensil. The lady, grinning too hard, simply said, "How wildly foreign." That gal was never quite asked back. And so here you sit, glowing with nice calm in 5 pounds of weave. The logs flicker, and you fight the urge to stick your foot out, even an inch, across the space. Your sibling does exactly that. He is a lad. The codes baby him. He might even take off his tie and get nothing worse than a fond eye roll. You, however, must stay perfect and warm. But not too warm. Dripping is crude. Shaking is frail. The only okay body heat is calm. You move your stare to the ice on the pane, where a tiny path left by someone's tips spells out a myth. Likely the chef's lad. He has no mittens, but the liberty to write on glass. You want that? Just a tad? The gate groans. Tea is being made. You breathe slowly and ready to sit another hour clad not only in fleece, but in acting. Because in Victorian winter manners, how you wear your heat is more telling than what you say. And the second you forget that, well, recall the soft cloth wearing Mrs. Addleston. She is still healing. You have been called to join a brief trip. Just a hike to the shop and back, your aunt states, as if the lane outside is not coated in deceit. You pull your mittens back on with the ritual calm of someone prepping for war, then step outdoors into the sharp, spirit-pinching air of a Victorian winter road. The first thing to note is that the frost does not care about your poise. The rock stairs are slick, the stones bumpy, and the drain has frozen into a thin ditch of dark glass. You fix your wrap and step lightly, aware that your every motion is being viewed not by your kin, but by the folks next door. From behind mesh drapes and slightly open blinds, they gaze out with the muted wonder of people who judge your value by how you stride across a icy walk. Sliding is not just risky, it is shameful. To trip in public is to welcome talk. Even if no one says anything to your visage, you will hear of it by the following afternoon. Did you hear the young girl from number 14 nearly fell into the fish seller's wagon? Poor soul. Must be jitters. No one will sight the ice, just your joints. You recall your relative Beatrice, who once caught her sole on a loose rock and fell straight onto her rear. The mark lasted a week. The guilt, 3 terms. Her mum still claims she had a dizzy spell, but everyone knows the fact. After all, news travels faster than chill. Your own shoes click against the rock with planned care. You have drilled this rate, the stride that matches style and hold. Too slow and you look shy. Too fast and you risk a shameful slide. So you float, or at least try to, with one palm gently touching your aunt's limb as both a show of aid and a quiet hook. Around you, the lanes have taken on their winter shape. Dairy men crunch through mush with cracked beams. A kind lad tips his cap with a grin, showing cheeks rubbed into hide. Ponies puff, clouds of steam that hang like spirits between structures. Even the light posts seem to quiver in place. Your aunt starts one of her running talks. Do not look at that meat stand. Too crude. Oh, that boy's jacket is too brief for nice folk. Poor raising, no doubt. And that lady crossing without a guard. She clicks her mouth. Bold or wild? Hard to tell these days. You nod at all the right seconds, half hearing, but your focus is on the stones. One bad step and you will be kept forever in someone else's tea chat. You have heard the tales. Mrs. Bramble, who broke her wrist outside the bread shop and was henceforth known as Shaky Bramble. Mr. Davies, who slid while dipping and ripped his pants. He moved to Bath shortly after. Chance? Unlikely. A wagon rumbles by, its rims kicking up lumps of frozen dirt. You step aside just in time to dodge a splash that would have tagged you for days. Your aunt nods happily, as if skipping a cart rim is a normal part of stock. You pass a paper boy, yelling titles with red digits and frozen lips. Icy mist. Water blocked. 2 gals fell in Limehouse Road, he yells. Your aunt sighs, not at the news, but at the lad's level. You fix your neckwear and look upward. The heaven is light, grey, low, and still. You feel it pushing down, not heavily, but with rank, like the time itself is watching to see if you slip. You will not hear, not in full view. The shop appears through the fog like a dream made of blocks, bins, and breath. Even in winter it beats with hushed stress. Tables groan under the load of dirt crops and cured fish. Bins of old fruits bunch together like they are saving heat, and everywhere folks move in the slow, stacked shuffle of living. You and your aunt nearing the cloth cellar first. She meets the shopkeeper with a dip so tiny you almost miss it. They exchange no more than a few quiet words, yet a whole pecking order is established in their silence. Your aunt is handed the finer fabric, the tighter weave with the better dye. A woman next to you with raw red hands and no hat is given the rougher stock. She stays quiet, but you watch her fingers grip the cloth hard. Winter does not just strip the trees, it strips away dignity. You follow your aunt, gloves tucked away and posture flawless, careful not to make eye contact with the coal man stacking sacks close by. He smells of ash and need. You would not say it out loud, but your aunt's sudden focus on the dried lavender proves she noticed it too and is choosing to notice something else instead. Then comes the true test. A patch of melting snow stretches across the alley between the vegetable carts and the pharmacy. The sun has not hit this side of the street in weeks. What hides under that slush is a mystery. A puddle, a pit, the gathered shame of 1,000 careless steps that your aunt glides over easily. You, however, pause, and right as you lift your foot, a group of boys rushes past, laughing, shoving, and completely free from the unspoken laws. One of them kicks up a spray of sludge that lands in a perfect curve on your hem. You freeze, both physically and socially. It is not a huge splash, just enough to darken the wool and leave a faint line of grime along the edge. But you know. Oh, you definitely know. It will be seen. The rules of winter manners say nothing about forgiveness, but everything about being watched. Your aunt turns, her face a mask. She says nothing, but her eyes dart to your skirt, and then to the boys, whose laughter is already fading away. You whisper an apology for stepping too close to the curb. She nods once, sharply, then goes back to her shopping. The incident is over, but not forgotten. You spend the next few minutes wondering if the stain will dry unseen, or if someone at home will offer you that dreaded phrase, no matter, "It is only winter." That is code for it is your fault for not being careful. On your way back, you pass 2 ladies you vaguely know from church. They look flawless, lace collars stiff enough to fight the fog, boots polished like black glass. They nod at your aunt and glance at you. One of them stares just a fraction of a second too long at your skirt. You manage a smile, tilt your chin up, and pretend you do not feel the cold dampness against your shin. As you get near home, the wind shifts, picking up old snow from rooftops and tossing it across your path like powdered judgment. You and your aunt step inside the front door, shaking off the cold in silence. She hands her hat to the maid, then turns to you. "Next time," she says softly, "choose the right side of the lane." That is it. No scolding, no sigh, no lecture. But you hear it all, because winter in high society is not just about frostbite and coal. It is about knowing where to walk, when to speak, and how to wear a ruined hem like it never happened. Back inside, you retreat to the breakfast room, a wrong name since no one actually eats there past 9 o'clock. But the fire still glows faintly, and you are allowed to sit there during mid-morning hours as long as you do not make noise, mess, or heaven forbid, heat a kettle. Uninvited, you perch on the bench farthest from the window, letting your skirts dry under layers of social control and leftover coal heat. The air smells faintly of yesterday's smoked fish, today's coal smoke, and the lingering, invisible ghost of someone else's cologne. You peel off your gloves with quiet care, noticing the stain on your skirt has already turned into a dull crust at the hem. You resist the urge to brush it, and then you see it, your breath still visible inside the house. In summer, you take for granted that rooms hold warmth, but in winter, each chamber has its own climate, its own weak grasp on comfort. This room in particular, facing northeast with a stubborn draught along the floorboards, was never meant to be warm. Its job is to appear warm. The wallpaper, the heavy curtains, the brass trim on the fireplace, all designed to imply coziness, not deliver it. You sit stiffly, aware that others may enter at any moment. You must look composed, engaged in quiet thinking, perhaps while stirring a cooling cup of tea or turning through a book of poetry without losing your place due to shaking fingers. The housemaid arrives with a tray. She says nothing, but you nod politely, acknowledging her without warmth. That is the rule. Politeness, but never familiarity. The tea is hot, but only just. You sip it carefully, more for the ritual than the relief. Your younger brother bursts into the room, hat crooked, cheeks red from playing with the gardener's boy. He shakes snow from his coat like a wet dog, utterly free of decorum. Your mother's voice echoes from the hallway before she even enters. James. No snow inside the house. He freezes mid-shake. You watch with interest. Boys are allowed their moments of chaos, but only just. Your mother enters, wrapped in a dressing gown and half-laced corset, clearly not yet prepared to see guests. Her cheeks are pink from the fire, or perhaps annoyance, and her tone shifts the moment she sees you already seated, composed, and very nearly proper. "Good. You are here," she says. "We will be receiving Mrs. Copeland shortly. Sit straighter and cover that spot on your hem." Ah, yes. The stain. Still watching you, you move your shawl discreetly, just enough to hide the mark. Your mother gives a small approving nod, then turns to James. "Go change and do not touch anything." He runs off, leaving behind a trail of melting snow and the smell of winter mischief. Mrs. Copeland is a neighbour, and though you have never heard her say anything mean, her eyebrows do more speaking than her lips. If she sees the stain, or worse, the slight tremble in your fingers, she will mention it in passing to the hat maker, who will mention it to the grocer's wife, who will in turn mention it while adjusting a price for your mother's ribbon. This is how frost travels in this society, not just through the streets, but through whispers over jam jars and cookie tins. You sip your tea and wait. Mrs. Copeland arrives precisely on time. Of course she does. No one fashionable is ever early, and only the desperate are late. You rise as she enters, dipping just slightly, not too low, or she might think you are overly eager. Not high and casual either, lest you seem dismissive. Just the right amount of politeness, with precisely the right degree of backbone. She is bundled in a velvet coat trimmed in what appears to be genuine fur. You feel the temperature in the room drop, despite the fire behind her. Her maid slips inside quietly with a parcel wrapped in oiled cloth and disappears down the corridor without acknowledgement. It is understood servants move like ghosts. Your mother, now fully composed and laced, offers her hand in greeting, which Mrs. Copeland accepts with gloved grace. Then come the pleasantries, so rehearsed and brittle they could shatter like a frozen pane. Such a bracing morning Mrs. Copeland offers, tugging at the fingers of her gloves one by one. "Indeed," replies your mother. "Though warmer than yesterday, would you not agree?" You wait. The moment is coming. Her eyes flick to you briefly, a glance no longer than the snap of a twig, but thorough enough to register everything. Your boots, your gloves now resting properly in your lap, the carefully repinned shawl concealing the stained hem. She sees it all, and then she smiles. Only her mouth moves. Your daughter is looking well. It is not a compliment, not quite. It is a probe, gently inserted into the conversation like the tip of a hatpin. Your mother thanks her with a pleasant murmur and turns the conversation to tea blends. You sit silently, nodding when expected, smiling when appropriate, fingers curled in your lap like folded ribbons. But your mind is spinning because this is winter etiquette at its most refined, the art of social skirmish conducted over lukewarm tea and lukewarm smiles. The fire crackles, the china clinks, and somewhere beneath it all is the hum of judgment, unspoken, polished, constant. You offer the biscuits when prompted, choosing the ginger ones. Safer, if someone so much as chips a tooth on a nut or makes a crumb on the carpet, it will be recounted for weeks. Mrs. Copeland declines, citing the weather. "I never eat sweets when it is damp." The body slows. The way she says the body suggests other people's bodies, certainly not hers. Eventually the visit ends. She departs with a flourish of her hand warmer and a final glance over her shoulder right at you. A flicker of something. Approval, pity, amusement. It does not matter. It is gone in an instant. Your mother exhales the moment the door shuts. Not a sigh. Victorian women never sigh, but a breath, just deep enough to suggest relief. "Well done," she says softly, without turning. "You held yourself well." You nod quietly, pleased in the cold chess game of drawing room survival. You have escaped today without a social bruise. The hem is still damp beneath the shawl, but your dignity remains starched and upright. As the fire settles into coals and the clink of cups fades, you realise something important in winter. It is not just your body that must be kept warm. It is your reputation, and the temperature of both is always being measured. The day drags on and the light outside dims into that curious half-shadow particular to a winter afternoon in this era, where it's not quite evening, not quite day, and everything is tinted the colour of old metal. You are called to the sitting room to help with correspondence, which in this house is code for watch your elders write letters while maintaining good posture and not speaking unless spoken to. The fire has gone down again, of course. Coal is not to be wasted. The embers are banked, the heat barely a whisper. You settle near the writing desk and accept the stack of envelopes handed to you, unsealed, cream-coloured, thick with weight and intent. Your job is simple. Fold, blot, stack, but never seal. That would be presumptuous. Your mother is already writing her fourth letter of the afternoon. You can tell from her expression that it is the one to Aunt Celia. The tone must be warm, but not too warm. Apologetic without implying guilt. Concerned but not intrusive. Letter writing in this world is a high form of choreography. And then it happens. The chimney groans. A deep, almost conversational sigh of soot and air that everyone in the room pretends not to notice. But your heart sinks because you have heard that sound before and you know what is coming next. It begins with a flutter of black snow, just a pinch, like confetti tossed at a very dull wedding. Then more, drifting lazily down from the hearth as the warm-up draft falters. You glance at the fire and see it, the dreaded backdraft. The chimney is sulking again. Your mother pauses mid-sentence. Not because she's startled, heavens no, but because the rules say that if soot is falling, one must pretend it is not. Only if it lands directly on your paper may you acknowledge it, and even then, only with the faintest flick of the wrist. A small mound collects in the fireplace. Your sister discreetly rises to fetch the screen. One of those lovely painted ones with birds and flowers, utterly useless at blocking soot, but essential for preserving appearances. She places it in front of the hearth. It wobbles slightly, then leans. The smudge of ash on the rug is beginning to widen, but still no one says anything. You are instead handed a fresh stack of blank paper. You've heard, of course, of the incident last year at the Crenshaws. A chimney sweep showed up late and Lady Crenshaw's new carpets were ruined by a gust of flue ash. She tried to host an afternoon tea the next week and not a soul came. Something about the air in that house feels unsettled. Your father finally enters, notices the fireplace and raises a brow, still acting up. Your mother glances at the screen only slightly. That in Victorian terms is practically a confession of disaster. A servant is dispatched to call the sweep. This means he will be arriving tomorrow just after dawn and will track Ash through the hallway, clatter about with brushes, and, most terrifying of all, speak out loud. He is one of the few men in London permitted to call soot and not residue, and that makes him dangerous. In the meantime, the room cools further. The fire cannot be tended until the flue is clear, and so your entire afternoon is now a test of resolve, finishing correspondence without letting your hands tremble, ignoring the faint scent of ash curling through your skirts and trying very hard not to sneeze, because sneezing, especially due to soot, is unladylike. The sweep arrives the next morning while the sky is still more night than day, a smudge of blue-grey barely peeling off the rooftops. You hear him before you see him, clattering metal rods, boots like hammers, and a low whistle that cuts through the cold like a blade through wax. You are not supposed to be in the hallway when he enters, but you linger behind the parlour door just long enough to catch a glimpse. He is small, no more than 15, perhaps younger, his face completely blackened with soot except for 2 piercing eyes. He carries his tools like a knight wields a lance, and for a moment he looks both older and more alive than anyone in your household. The housemaid guides him in with a kind of sideways reverence, the same way she would escort the coffin maker or the rat catcher, people whose jobs are vital but must not be seen too clearly. He disappears into the hearth like a magician's trick. You hear the scratch of his brush in the chimney flue, the scatter of grit onto the iron grate, and somewhere upstairs, a soft groan of dislodged soot trickling downward like dark snow. You are shuffled away before he re-emerges because it would be unseemly to watch. He is paid in coin and dismissed with a hasty slice of bread wrapped in cloth. No one offers tea. No one says thank you. He leaves as silently as he came, trailing a single black fingerprint along the back door latch. Back in the sitting room, the fire is restored to good health, crackling, assertive, even a little smug. But now the etiquette shifts again. You see, once the chimney has been swept, the ash must not be acknowledged, not the faint cloud still hovering near the baseboards, not the black smear clinging to the poker. Cleanliness must be assumed. To mention soot is to imply that something soiled your home, and respectable society is not compatible with the idea that dirt, much less coal dirt, might exist indoors. This unwritten rule leads to curious behaviours. Your aunt once spilled ash across the parlour carpet during a particularly enthusiastic bout of fire tending. Rather than fetch the maid, she covered it with a large fern until evening. When the fern was removed, the stain remained, but so did the silence. It is still there, faint and shadowed like a memory no one will claim. In your own home, the soot is handled wordlessly. A folded cloth appears. A small broom is employed. No one speaks. The maid coughs into her sleeve, an innocent cough, but one that risks crossing into vulgarity. You hear it and feel a twinge of guilt. She is probably colder than any of you, fingers red and raw, knuckles grey with coal dust. But etiquette forbids pity when it requires discretion. Kindness, perhaps, but not visible emotion, certainly not comfort. Later that afternoon, the drawing room is pronounced settled. The fire burns evenly, no longer rebelling. Tea is poured, letters are resumed, and though the faint scent of soot still clings to the drapes, no one remarks on it. But you remember the boy, the flash of his eyes, the way he vanished into the hearth like he belonged to the brickwork. You wonder if he works every house on this street, if he knows which families tip well, if he dreams of warmth, or if it is so unfamiliar that he stopped. Now, noticing its absence, you place your glove back on your lap and pick up your pen. You write your name in perfect cursive, the letters clean and symmetrical on the page, because in this house neatness is more important than comfort, and winter, no matter how much soot it brings, must always be endured with grace. You wake the next morning to an odd quiet, a muffled stillness that presses against the windows like a held breath. It takes a moment to realise what is different. Then you see it. Snow, thick, soft, and blanketing the world in a hushed coat of white. The streets, the rooftops, even the coal cart outside, all blurred into a single pale sheet, like someone scraped away the city soot and left behind a blank page. And that means only one thing. The Thames has frozen. You hear the news from your cousin who bursts into the breakfast room half-laced, half-dressed, and wholly improper. They are building booths on the ice. Already he grins, crumbs flying from his mouth. Father says we may go before noon. Your mother looks up from her paper, raising a sceptical brow. If the frost holds, she replies, as if the river's freeze were an unreliable but charming suitor. But inside, everyone is already buzzing. The frost fair, when the river turns into a market, a circus, a playground, and a minefield of etiquette traps all rolled into one, is both thrilling and terrifying. It is a once-in-a-generation spectacle, and everyone who is anyone will be there. Preparations begin immediately. By 10 o'clock, the entire household is a flurry of layered garments, fur-lined cloaks, carriage requests, and carefully packed parcels of tea cakes and oranges wrapped in waxed cloth. No one speaks aloud what they are all thinking. Please do not fall in. The river is frozen, yes, but only in places. There are still dark patches where water gleams beneath the ice like eyes waiting to blink. You are laced tightly into your best walking gown. Charcoal with silver buttons, chosen for both warmth and contrast against the snow. Your boots are polished. Your hand warmer has been discreetly lined with hot bricks wrapped in flannel. You are ready. The carriage ride down is slow. Everyone in London seems to have the same idea. Horses tread cautiously, their hooves muffled against the packed snow. You pass a line of men hauling barrels, women with arms full of bread loaves, children pulling sleds made from wooden crates and rope. It is a strange procession, like a cheerful migration across some frozen kingdom. And then you see it. The river, wide and white, stretched flat like a ballroom floor. The arches of the bridges loom above, but below, where water should churn, there is only ice, dotted with tents, booths, and fluttering pennants. Smoke rises in lazy curls from tiny fires. Laughter carries in pockets on the wind. Someone is playing a fiddle. A dog chases a rolling hoop. The frost fair has begun. You step down from the carriage, your foot crunching onto the river's back. A shiver crawls up your spine, not from cold, but awe. This is the Thames, and yet not solid, but fragile. A miracle of cold weather and collective denial. Because everyone knows the ice might not hold, but today it will. You link arms with your sister and begin walking at once. You are surrounded by movement. Ladies in heavy capes and wide skirts, gentlemen in tall hats trying to appear unbothered on the slippery surface, vendors shouting above the noise. Someone is selling roasted chestnuts. Someone else is offering tiny ink sketches of your likeness drawn on the Thames. They call out. Your sister stops to buy a blue ribbon that has been frozen stiff on its spool. "Proof I was here," she says. You nod. Proof. And also protection, because surviving a frost fair is as much about being seen as it is about staying dry. The deeper you wander onto the frozen Thames, the stranger the world becomes. A man in a velvet coat juggles oranges with frostbitten fingers. Nearby, a barber is offering shaves on the ice beneath a hand-painted sign, his customer sitting atop an upturned barrel, a sheet wrapped loosely around his shoulders as though he were not trembling from head to toe. Youngsters dash around, their giggles blending with the snapping of burning logs and the steady beat of blades gliding over the ice. Over to your left, a man has set up a printing press and is marking souvenir cards with heavy dark type that reads, Thames, January 14th, 1855. You have to ask yourself how many of these folks can actually feel their fingertips at this point. Your sibling tugs you in the direction of a merchant selling candied nuts, and the two of you split a small sack, chewing them gradually while your breath clouds the atmosphere. The sugar tastes piercing in the freezing weather. A lady dressed in green almost crashes into you, her shoes sliding for a second, but she steadies herself with a chuckle and an elegant turn, fixing her stance just quickly enough to save her good name. That is the secret, right? It does not matter how slick the ground is, you have to always look like you are in charge. You think back to Lady Wiltham's notorious fall at the previous Frost Fair, when her wide skirts flipped up like a bell, exposing both ankles and her shockingly plain undergarments. That event was the main gossip of the season. She departed for Bath to recover her health and came back with fresh clothes and a conveniently rewritten memory. The identical regulations apply out here. If you trip, make it look like a dance move. If you go down, get up while laughing elegantly. And if your foot breaks through a weak spot in the ice, try your hardest to act like the river water in your shoe is simply refreshing. Your own walking remains stable for the moment, but the wind bites at your face, and the ground beneath your shoes moves ever so slightly. You sense it, not exactly as motion, but as a type of flexing, as if the river is breathing underneath you. It serves as a reminder that the frost is not your ally. It is a guest, exactly like you, and it is not one to stay longer than it should. You walk by a stall covered in trinkets, stamped metal hearts, copper sewing thimbles, tiny shoes, and you spot an old woman crouched behind it, her wrap wet with dissolving snow. She watches you closely. Something to keep you balanced? She inquires, her tone a blend of smoke and ancient mysteries. You give a polite smile and say no, but your sister stays behind. She rubs a silver charm shaped like the sole of a boot and pushes it into her hand. For good fortune, she states, you do not make fun of her. You are starting to sense the validity in her gut feeling. Up ahead, your mother and aunt signal from a striped canopy, already sitting at a temporary table with vaporous mugs of tea. You sit with them, thankful for the brief cover, and position yourself as gracefully as your half-frozen dress permits. The tea is burning hot, it stings your tongue, but you appreciate it. Within the tent, the regulations are back in place, spine straight, gloves worn unless sipping, napkin on the lap, never the knee. Even out here on top of a frozen river, the performance goes on. A sharp snap resonates from somewhere way behind you. Every person goes still, not the river, simply the crowd. Talking stops, giggles fade away. You all wait, holding your breath. Then a seabird cries out above, and somebody clears their throat. A fresh song begins on the violin. The second passes, but the shiver that travels down your back has almost nothing to do with the weather. You take a small drink of tea and look around. Nobody speaks of the noise. To talk about the danger is to welcome it, because the Frost Fair might be a celebration. But underneath your boots the river is waiting, and every proper Victorian understands it is impolite to overstay a miracle. You get back from the Frost Fair in the early afternoon, face red and shoes soaked completely. The walk from the carriage to the front door is brief, but the chill has located the gap between your glove and your cuff, and it sinks its claws in. You hold your posture upright, naturally. The front porch is no location for grimacing. Once you are indoors, you strip off your outer layers one by one. Wrap, cloak, hand warmer, outer skirt. Everything is moist. Everything is slightly marked with soot or candy. The housekeeper takes your boots with a barely visible cringe. One of the soles has begun to detach. She does not speak, but you know she is already calculating how to dry them out without splitting the leather. Your fingers feel raw, your jaw is sore from mandatory smiling, and your gloves. Oh, your gloves are destroyed. The sewing has come undone at the bottom of the thumb. You lift them toward the window, checking the ruin with a blend of dread and acceptance. Because gloves in Victorian winter society are more than just clothing. They are declarations, and yours are unravelling. Gloves represent a strange language in public. They serve as shields. You wear them to greet people, to unseal envelopes, to sit in a church bench or drink tea or offer support. They are the permanent wall between flesh and rumours. A bare hand in the incorrect setting can suggest hopelessness, sickness, or even worse, boldness. A hand without a glove on a gentleman's coat can ruin a good name faster than a whispered piece of gossip. You recall your mother's words. Only two kinds of women go without gloves, peasants and fools, and you are neither of those. This is why your gloves count, why the torn seam feels like a tear in your disguise. Still, you cannot obsess over it. The sitting room is waiting for you. Put on an older pair, black soft leather, a bit wrinkled, and go down the steps with rehearsed elegance. Your sister meets you by the fireplace where a small fire burns behind the guard. She takes off her gloves gradually, one finger after another, as if she were revealing a mystery. She sets them neatly on the chair arm, palms facing down, fingers straight. You mimic her movement exactly. These tiny routines are what keep the day from falling apart. A minute later, your brother bursts in from the yard, snowflakes dissolving on his jacket. Hands completely bare, he tosses his gloves onto the side table with all the grace of a cannonball. Your mother's head turns sharply. "James," she says, "how often must I tell you gloves are not to be thrown?" He smiles, unaware, and skips up the stairs. You share a look with your sister. Boys can get away with such crimes. Their futures are cushioned with promise, not burdened with observation. But for you, every move is calculated. You remember a tale passed down from your grandmother regarding a young woman at a winter concert who dropped a single glove in the entrance and came back 5 minutes later to find it taken by the minister's wife. The girl was labelled negligent, or maybe flirtatious. The facts did not matter, only the perception. You stretch your fingers inside the soft leather, letting them sit gently on your knees. The gloves are warm now, moulded to you, but the reminder remains that winter manners are not just about being cold. They are about who is permitted to show it and who has to conceal it under soft, well-stitched leather. Evening arrives with its standard silent command, covering the parlour in a haze of lamp glow and stretched shadows. The fire pops politely now, watched closely after yesterday's ash incident, and everybody takes their assigned spots. The glass is clouded from the inside, and outside the street lamps flicker through the ice like far-off stars smeared by sleep. This is the time for well-behaved company, for reading stories, for the type of pointless chat that hides 100 levels of scrutiny. But more than that, this is the time of the ungloved hand. Not totally bare, naturally. You would never sit with uncovered fingers unless in the most private of environments. But here, in the secure boundaries of family and close friends, gloves are permitted to be loosened, taken off, even gently, slowly, one finger at a time, never all at once, always with an intent. You undo yours with specific care, thumb first, then the pointer finger, always in sequence. You lay them, palms down, on the surface next to your tea. If anyone saw you right now, your hands washed, your nails curved but simple, your skin light from the winter sun, it would communicate exactly what you needed it to communicate. She is well-maintained, well-taught, and deserving of respect. Because gloves are more than a shield against the frost. They are a screen between the self and the public. A young lady's gloved hand states, "I understand the regulations." An ungloved hand states, "I trust you." And sometimes, just on occasion, It says something even more risky. There is a memory that floats up with the vapour of your drink. A few winters back, during a spontaneous meeting after the service, you had been placed next to a young man from Cambridge. He was smart. Too smart. Likely. And while everybody talked about rhymes and train growth, he leaned in a bit, glanced at your gloves and asked, "Do you ever take those off, or are you always working?" You recall chuckling. You recall undoing one glove, only the one, slowly, and you recall the expression on his face. Entertained, shocked, slightly worried. You had not touched him. You had not spoken anything wrong, but the signal had been obvious enough. You still reflect on that second, occasionally, particularly now, as you sit in a space full of firelight and rules where even a cough has to be smothered. Into a handkerchief stitched with letters. Your sister across from you is repairing a glove. Not hers, naturally. She says her sewing is not delicate enough. These belong to the preacher's girl, sent over quietly in a pile of repairs. The seam had frayed at the wrist, a shameful little rip, likely from rushed removal, or worse, careless romance. Your sister does not remark, but she threads the needle with a type of serious dignity. Outside, you hear the distant noise of a horse-pulled delivery wagon on frozen stones. The noise reminds you that the world past the glass is still, sharp, still frozen, still observing. The gloves will go back on before anybody exits the house, the second you stand up, actually, even if it is only to walk through the corridor. Because ungloved hands belong to moments, private ones, hushed ones, and in a world of non-stop acting, they are your most understated form of protest. You stretch your fingers once, feeling the atmosphere against your skin. Then you slide the gloves back on. Soft, rehearsed, fluid. Nobody notices, but somebody always does. The morning following the frost fair has left a different sort of chill behind. Not in your skeleton, but in your duties. Your mother gives you a small pile of calling cards during the morning meal. "We have to visit the Marshams this afternoon," she states, as if you had offered. "And the Fletchers, if the weather stays, they have put up a new carriage cover. It would be impolite not to see it." You nod your head, obedient but empty. Winter calls are the most punishing of all social customs. Visiting neighbours when the streets are slick, when the gale slices through 4 layers of wool, and when the tea is nearly always room temperature and poured in cups too fragile for shaking hands, it is a show wrapped in ice. But you get ready. The regulations are exact. Gloves on, coat fastened, hat tied firmly, calling cards tucked into your hand warmer where they will not warp from dampness or lose their sharpness. You travel in the carriage with your sister, neither of you talking much. There is nothing to say. You both understand how this will play out. The first halt, the Marshams. Their road is bordered by frozen drain ditches that shine like silver blades. The front porch has been sprinkled with wood chips which crackle under your shoes. A worker opens the entryway exactly 12 seconds after the chime is pulled, fast enough to suggest preparedness, but not so quick as to look bored. You walk into a corridor so freezing your breath bounces off the wall covering. "Mrs. Marsham will see you in the blue parlour," the servant says, already walking away. Naturally she will. The blue parlour, never heated, properly selected precisely because visitors will not stay long. You peel off your outer wrap, but keep your gloves on. It is much too soon in the visit to take them off. Removing gloves is an act of closeness, even between women, and today's call is strictly tactical. Mrs. Marsham welcomes you with her standard frozen smile of politeness. Her dress is dark blue fabric with white wrists that have never seen a real fire. The 3 of you sit in a triangle of stress around a tea table that vapours weakly. You are offered a cup. You take it, even though it smells slightly of boiled fabric and citrus. You sip. It stings your tongue a bit. You remain silent. The chat starts. "I certainly hope the frost fair did not ruin your rest," Mrs. Marsham says, her eyes shining with a type of entertainment that hides evaluation. We heard the racket from here. Some of the tunes were quite spirited. You smile. We were back before dark, your sister mentions. It was quite a scene. I think I saw somebody selling wax statues of the Queen. Oh my, Mrs. Marsham answers. The crown for sale. Everyone laughs quietly. It is a jest, but not completely. Then comes the quiet battle. She looks at your boots, still slightly wet at the bottoms, at your gloves, a string just starting to free itself at the wrist, at your tea plate, where a single drip has slipped from your cup and stayed on the china like a charge. You move just enough to imply pride but not unease, and when she inquires, "Have you heard about poor Mrs. Denby's fall on the ice?" you answer with the ideal blend of worry and distance. Oh no, how terrible. I certainly hope she was not badly troubled, because in these calls pity must never imply similarity. You have to show sadness without hinting it could ever happen to you. You depart the Marshams with cheeks red from more than the frost. The second the carriage door snaps shut, you breathe out. She spotted the loose string, your sister says plainly. You do not reply. Naturally she did. That was the whole goal of her look. Hunting, listing, filing you away under whatever silent tag she picks. Passable, exhausted, sliding, still decent for now. The carriage bumps down the slick road toward your next meeting. The Fletchers. Their house is smaller, but somehow colder. The sitting room has a solitary fire that appears more for show than for warmth, and a spread of frost climbs up the interior of the glass like netting made by spirits. You walk in with your gloves still on, trading hellos with Mrs. Fletcher, a tall lady who talks with a dialect that changes depending on who is listening. Today she sounds slightly Scottish, maybe to match her wool-plaid wrap, which conflicts wonderfully with the pink fabric on the chairs. The actual challenge here, however, is the tea. The Fletchers pride themselves on offering strange mixtures, green teas, oolongs, and even a terrifying smoked type from Russia that tastes like chimney water and sorrow. You take your cup with a grin so rigid it could be chiselled from stone and drink carefully, letting the fluid barely hit your tongue. It is terrible. Your sister handles it better. She praises the taste, somehow maintaining a neutral face. You make a hazy noise of agreement, the kind that could be read as joy or slight stomach pain. Then the subject moves to style. Risky ground. Mrs. Fletcher points toward your sister's gloves. Those are lovely. Did you have them coloured in town? You look sideways. This is an exam. Actually, your sister answers. They were a present from our relative in Bath. The dye is gentler there. Mrs. Fletcher nods her head slowly. Naturally. So many shades look loud in this light. You want to chuckle, but you do not. Nobody in this space would survive a genuine compliment. Every phrase is a puzzle, a block, a folded cloth concealing a sharp utensil. The visit comes to an end with the ritual of trading cards. Your mother always stated, a calling card is not an invite. It is a show. It says, I was here, I saw you, and I need nothing in return except recognition. You set yours with caution on the metal plate, angled, never in a pile, name facing up, no marks. And now comes the last level of manners, the departure. You stand up, adjust your scarf, and grab your gloves. But here is the trick. Gloves must be put back on, after you have reached the corridor, but before you touch the entryway. Timing is everything. To pull them on. Too early looks desperate, too late, and you seem unskilled. You shoot for that flawless second between the servant's nod and the lock's snap to slide your hand back into its leather shell like you have done it 1,000 times, because you have. The door swings open. The breeze hurts your face. The world outside is still white, still looking. Inside the carriage once more, your sister finally talks. She brought up my gloves intentionally. You nod and you succeeded. She looks eased. So did you. You both sit in quiet for a minute, watching the mist collect on the glass, the outlines of chimney stacks flickering by like crooked teeth. Visiting in winter is not about talking. It is about getting through the inspection without ever letting anyone see you sweat, or worse, shake. The evening comes close, and so does the coughing. It starts silently, just a single smothered noise from somewhere upstairs, then another from the housekeeper as she comes back from the washroom with red cheeks and a layer of cold sweat across her forehead. You look at your sister, but she dodges your stare. Everyone hears it. Nobody comments because in a Victorian home, sickness must be managed carefully. A loud cough is not simply a signal of a cold, it is an interruption, a danger to the peaceful dance of the house. And in winter, when the air is heavy with coal smoke and breath creates clouds visibly indoors, sickness is unavoidable. But confessing it, that is another issue entirely. You go to the lounge, where the fire is popping politely and the air smells slightly of lemon polish and stiff fabric. Your aunt sits with a wrap around her shoulders and a small square of cloth at her mouth. The moisture, that is all she says, though nobody asked. A bit of dust in the drapes. She says this every winter. The manners surrounding illness are complex and draining. To validate your own cold is looking for attention. To validate someone else's is arrogant. You have to walk the line between pity and invasion, between worry and rudeness. Your mother, for example, has mastered the craft of winter nursing. Not through drugs, heavens no, but through routine. Strong oil rubbed quietly into the sheets, herbal leaves tucked into folded tissues, small spoons of honey brought without remark to anyone who clears their throat twice in 1 hour, but never, ever spoken out loud. Once your cousin's teacher had the nerve to announce she had the flu. Not a chill, not tiredness, but the flu. She was fired within the week. It is not that she was sick, your aunt had whispered. It is that she said it. So you clear your own throat quietly, then feel a surge of guilt. 3 clears in under a minute is shady. You sip tea, though it has gone cold, just to give your hand a job. Across the room, your grandmother naps in a seat, her breath rattling slightly through her lips. Nobody wakes her. If she is sick, it is simply part of the season. She has lived through 6 London winters, 3 rounds of chest infections, and at least one maid who promised the house was haunted by draught spirits. She will survive this too. The second noise of coughing returns, this time from the washroom. The maid appears a minute later with a tray, her eyes slightly glazed, her hand shaking as she pours the tea. You watch her wrists, raw, red, split from soap and frost. She is trying so hard not to sniff. The tray shakes ever so slightly as she puts it down. Nobody says a phrase. You wonder if she has relatives, if she mails letters home, if they know that when you are sick in service you work twice as hard to appear half as sick. There is no rule book for a coughing maid, not one that includes rest, only replacement. Your sister slides a folded cloth onto the tray before the maid turns. It has initials. It is soft, still warm. The maid stops. She does not speak, just lowers her eyes, takes the tray, and exits. That night, when you get changed for bed in the freezing upstairs room, you stop at your bowl. You cough once, twice. The glass clouds from your breath and you say nothing. You lie in bed, covered in layers of soft wool and one slightly doubtful hot brick, wrapped in an old kitchen towel at your feet. The glass shakes as the wind moans down the side street. Somewhere in the blackness, a coal cart groans past, its driver yelling into the nothingness like a spirit calling home. And still more coughing this time from the room next door. You know the noise. It is your sister. Short, dry explosions, not yet dangerous, but steady, predictable. She too says nothing. You recall a winter 3 years ago when your cousin Mary took to bed for 6 days with what everyone pretended was fatigue. The physician was called, but not during daylight hours. He came at 10 in the evening and left through the kitchen entrance. His invoice was folded into a can and never spoken of again. Mary got better, mostly. She is pale even in summer now. The regulations of sickness are not about health. They are about story. You can be sleepy but not sick, resting but never bedbound. If you must faint, do it in church, never at home, and never near a gentleman. That is how reputations fade, not in disgrace, but in sniffles. A tap at your door. Soft, unsure, you get up, draped in a wrap, and crack it open. It is your sister, wrapped in a quilt, her cheeks red, a shine of desperation in her eyes. "I am freezing," she says quietly. You do not ask why she did not ring for the maid. You already know to call focus to oneself is to invite judgment, but between sisters there is a peace treaty. You let her in, guide her toward your bed, and together you construct a shell of warmth and quiet. The hot brick is moved between you. You both pretend it still has heat left. She coughs again, buried into your arm. "I will not tell," you whisper. She nods. "Neither will I." This, too, is winter manners, the silent agreement of shared pain masked beneath blankets and politeness. You each know what is required in the morning. Bright eyes, steady steps, no visible tiredness. If either of you slips, the other will smooth the truth like starch across a shirt collar. The next day she gets up early, dresses well, and goes down the stairs with her standard grace. You follow. The sitting room is bright, falsely, so everyone is present. Nobody mentions the dark rings under her eyes, but your mother hands her a cup of tea without asking, and your aunt demands the windows be shut just for today. The maid, her cough now more constant, is nowhere to be seen. You do not ask, because the rules are obvious. To care is allowed, to show it is forbidden. That is the gamble. Pity is private, kindness whispered. Sickness above all must never disrupt the sitting room. You restart your sewing. The fire snaps and someone switches the topic to the condition of the waterway. Your sister coughs just once more and then not again. It is winter, and in this house everyone is quietly sick, and everyone is just fine. Downstairs, far from the parlour, beyond the border of the family's well-kept quiet, the rules change, but only slightly. You go down to the workers' level rarely, and when you do it is like slipping behind the backdrop of a theatre show. The atmosphere is heavier, coloured with vapour, coal, and boiled greens. The floors are naked, the walls scuffed from endless passing boots. It is colder here in a different way, no less sharp, but somehow more truthful. Today, you have been sent to get a repaired piece of clothing from the washroom, a job deemed too small for a maid and too intimate for a footman. You walk through the rock hallway quickly, ears filled with the noises of scrubbing. Iron hissing and distant kitchen commands barked just above a whisper. In the washroom, two girls are curved over a mound of wet fabrics, arms red from the rinse water. Their sleeves are pushed up to the elbow, not proper, but required. You offer a nod. They dip in response, eyes down, cheeks red not from shame, but from the heat of labour and the chill of everything else. You are not expected to stay, but you do, because it is in these dim corners that winter behaves differently. Here, manners do not mean which glove you take off first, or how quietly you cough. It means not falling over while carrying the coal bucket. It means folding sheets with fingers that cannot feel the hem. It means never ever gripping about your boots, even if the bottoms have split and your socks are soaked. By sunrise, you pause at the drying ropes strung above the oven, where socks, dozens of them, hang like surrender banners. A pair of your own is there, fixed at the heel. You hope nobody can tell. A young boy rushes past with an armload of wood. He is no older than 10. His nose runs, but he does not stop to clean it. There is soot on his cheek, and something empty in his eyes. He vanishes through a swinging door without a noise. This is what it means to be warm down here, always in motion, always aware. Stillness is a treat reserved for those upstairs beside the fire, sipping overbrewed tea and acting out discomfort like it is a party game. Below stairs, discomfort is the standard. You find your item, your half-fixed outer skirt, folded neatly beside a stack of cloths. There is a note attached to it, the writing clumsy but sincere. Apologies for the burnt edge. I have redone the section. Warm wishes. E. You do not know who he is. You do not ask. You will say nothing, naturally, when you wear the skirt again. Nothing about the sewing being just a touch crooked. Nothing about the thread being a slightly different shade. Because here, in this unheated hallway, you are reminded of something your teacher once said, perhaps not planning to be heard. Servants survive winter. Gentlefolk weather it. You step back toward the stairs, skirt in hand, heart slightly heavier than when you arrived. Behind you, someone coughs into a sleeve and is promptly ignored. Upstairs, the sitting room waits, but before you return, you pause just inside the stairwell, holding your breath, listening. There is no music down here, no laughter, only heat from work and silence worn like wool. Back upstairs, the difference nearly knocks the breath from your lungs. It is not warmer, not really, but it feels like it should be. The walls are covered, the carpets thick, the furniture soft and obedient. The air smells faintly of lavender wax and the last remnants of rose water. You return to your room to hang the skirt, smoothing it gently along the closet rail as though it had never been touched by ash or burn or the rough red hands of someone who works before dawn. A knock at the door. It is the housemaid, the younger one, the one with the always fastened cap and the eyes too weary for her years. She holds a tray perfectly steady with a cup of soup and a folded cloth napkin. "For your sister, miss," she says softly. You thank her. She bobs a quick dip, already turning away. "Is it true the other maid is sick?" you ask. Before you can stop yourself. She pauses. The silence stretches. Then, without looking back, she says, "She is resting, miss," and disappears down the hall. Resting. That word, again. You bring the tray to your sister's room. She is sitting in bed, back straight despite the red cheeks. She smiles faintly at the sight of you, then at the soup. "Smells like boiled paper," she mumbles, and you both laugh, careful not to wake the house. She dips her spoon in, slow and measured, never slurping, never too large a bite. Even sickness must be eaten with grace. You sit beside her, watching the fire spit in its cage. It was fed earlier, probably by the same boy you passed downstairs. You wonder what room he sleeps in, if he sleeps at all. You imagine a narrow bed beside the coal boxes, fingers cracked and blackened, dreams stained grey. I've heard your sister says, stopping between sips, that in some houses the servants are allowed to cook potatoes in the fireplace. You look at her. Really? She shrugs, smiling. Probably a legend like warm laundry or fair pay. You both fall quiet. Then she adds almost distantly, "We live above them, but not apart from them, do we?" It is a dangerous thought, not in rebellion, but in honesty. And honesty is a cold breeze in this house, uncomfortable, unwelcome, hard to block. You do not answer. You just sit a little closer. That night, as you get ready for bed, you hear the older maid coughing somewhere in the walls. Not loud, not begging, just a soft rhythmic sound, like someone tapping gently at a door that no one opens. And still the fires are lit, the soup is served, the cloth is fixed. You wake early the next morning and find the hallway already cleaned, the fireplace already warm, your boots scrubbed of yesterday's ash. No one speaks of who did it. Nobody has to say it, since underneath the manners and the woolen wraps, the whole estate functions on the unseen ballet of hands that remain hidden, and in winter those hands move faster, work harder, and bleed more just so everything above can remain quiet and clean. You put on your gloves and say nothing. Bathing in winter is not something you do. It is something you simply have to survive. You are called up to the dressing room right after noon, just when the sun is at its weakest, and the fireplace has been convinced to offer a gloomy light. The maid is already stationed there with her sleeves pushed up, the metal hip bath placed like a ritualistic altar on the freezing tile floor. A pot of water hisses next to her, and a second one waits on the coals downstairs, getting ready for its long trip up the rear staircase. There is no indoor plumbing here, certainly not in a traditional Victorian home. That kind of modern ease is reserved for hotels and sick people. Decent families still wash using a basin, a kettle, and pure determination. You tremble, and the maid acts like she does not see it. She pours the first kettle into the tub. The steam lifts like a spirit, briefly clouding the small window pane. You step ahead as if it is nothing, as if your toes are not already curling back inside your boots, as if you actually want this. There are regulations, naturally. Baths happen once a week, or twice if there is a visitor or a problem. Hair is cleaned even less frequently because getting it dry can consume most of the day. And God forbid anyone sees you with your hair hanging down like a laundry woman. The water has to be tepid, never hot, and poured gently to stop any splashing. Steam, you have been taught, is rude. It suggests luxury. You take off your clothes in silence, one layer at a time. Every button feels like a punishment. You hand the clothes to the maid. As you take them off, she folds them without staring. There is nothing inappropriate in this routine, nothing personal. It is just rules and necessity. Once you are down to your undergarment, you step into the shallow water. It is warmer than you thought, just barely, but the metal tub pushes cold against your legs, a silent note that comfort is not the objective. Being clean is. Modesty is a form of discipline. The maid adds another kettle. You whisper a thank you. Then she exits, not to give you privacy, but to get the third kettle. And now you are by yourself. The bath is tiny, barely deep enough to wash your knees. You lift one leg, then the other, trying to spread the warmth around. You wash with a cloth and soft soap that smells slightly of lavender and much stronger of lye. Your breath clouds in the air, and your arms get goosebumps. There is a belief among the staff that getting a chill while washing is how weak lungs start. Consumption does not come from God. It comes from freezing water and stupidity. You rinse your body fast and efficiently. The maid comes back just in time for the last pour, a small kettle over your shoulders. The heat makes you gasp. Then it is gone. You get out the moment the water stops moving. No waiting around. That would be greedy. You dry off fast with a scratchy towel, and the maid wraps you in a flannel robe with the care of someone holding glass. No eye contact, no talking. She hauls the bath out by the handles, her small body barely handling the weight. You hear her shoes drag on the floor as she turns the corner, water splashing softly as she vanishes. Mist sticks to the glass, blurring your reflection into a stranger. Pale arms, wet hair, and something else, something sharp behind the eyes. You get dressed fast. The fire is low again and the room is cooling down quickly by the time you go back downstairs. Nobody talks about you being gone because winter baths, like sickness and servants, are not topics for polite society. They just occur in the background. You go down the stairs with damp hair pinned tightly under your lace cap, your skin a bit pink from the scrubbing, your dignity fixed. There is a slight chill still holding onto your lower back despite the layers of linen and wool now wrapped around you. But you say nothing. Always nothing. The sitting room is hotter than before. Someone must have paid the boy to fix the fire early. You slide into your normal chair and pick up your sewing frame. The others do not even look up. That is how you know you did it correctly. There is a pattern to cleanliness in winter, and it is a silent one. You are supposed to look fresh but not scrubbed, glowing but not red. To look too clean is to look like you tried too hard. And trying is the death of everything in a house where life is supposed to look easy. Your sister comes in a moment later, a slight smell of violet water following her. She's already composed, her eyes darkened with just enough kohl to look awake, her gloves on but not yet buttoned. You look at each other. both knowing what the other just survived in different dressing rooms. Neither of you mentions it. Across the room, your cousin Geoffrey relaxes by the fire with a paper, the perfect image of male comfort. He has not washed in 3 days, you are certain, and no one will bring it up, not unless his collar starts to yellow. Even then it will be asked as a question, not a judgment. Is your washerwoman sick? The gender gap in winter hygiene is as sharp as the difference between the parlour and the kitchen. For women, cleanliness is a requirement. For men, it is a hint, one that can be ignored if the boots are polished and the tie is knotted right. You drink tea, the cup warm, but the liquid lukewarm. Everything this season is lukewarm. Water, standards, facial expressions, even the praise. From the window, you see the neighbour's girl, Clara May, getting into a waiting carriage. Her hair is loose under her hat, a scandal on its own. Worse, she is flushed, not from cold, but from rushing. She must have been running late. You and your sister share a look. There will be gossip, and the gossip will start with her hair. Did you see Clara May this morning? Someone will whisper. She looked wild. Someone else will add the real judgment. Poor thing. I guess it is hard to find good help these days, because the blame never lands on the weather or the time or the girl herself. It lands on her damp hair. Damp hair means mess, and mess means failure. You check your own reflection in the parlour mirror, a trick you have learned to do without looking vain. The cap sits right, the cheeks modestly pink. Nothing to grab attention, just the right amount of obvious effort. Behind you the fire moves, sending a snap through the room. Your brother turns a page. No one talks. The silence is soft and heavy and cold on the edges, and somewhere downstairs your bathwater is being dumped out into the snow-filled yard, a habit as old as the house itself. Warm up? Wash off? Forget it ever happened. Tomorrow you will do it all again, because winter in this world is not something you discuss, it is something you polish until it disappears. The snow is heavier today, packed solid into the street, pressed flat by iron shoes and boot soles. The world outside the house has gone soft and grey, every noise muted except the rare distant ring of carriage bells. Your mother decides it is time to visit your aunt in Kensington, not for any specific reason but because winter demands that appearances be kept. Even freezing weather cannot excuse missing a social call, not without a doctor's note or a quiet tragedy. So, you get ready. The carriage is waiting by 1:30, brought around by the footman with his scarf pulled up so high you can barely see his nose. You and your sister are already dressed in your outdoor gear, gloves, cloaks, muffs and a shawl over the bonnet, just in case the wind is harder near the river. The ride itself is dull, if shaky. You count 16 chimney pots blowing smoke along the roofs, and at least 3 boys sliding dangerously across icy steps. You see a woman slip, her hat sliding into the street like a spun coin. The man with her pauses, then grabs it before helping her. You share a look with your sister. Not a marriage proposal then, she whispers. You smile behind your gloved hand. When you get there, your aunt's maid meets you at the door and guides you straight into the drawing room, already half full of family and other guests, who, like you, are all pretending to be warm. You take your spot, sitting politely on a cushioned chair near the fireplace, though not too close. The circle is already made. The room is full of social math. Every boot that walks in leaves a mark of slush. Every coat is checked for salt stains. Every seat has a meaning. And then it happens. The door opens wide and a gentleman walks in, tall, light-haired, and clearly frozen. His face is red, his scarf is messy, and his breath still clouds in the doorway. He is in every way improperly warm, yet nobody says a word. He takes off his gloves too fast. His fingers are red from the cold, and as he pulls his coat off, a light dusting of snow drops to the rug. You can see Mrs. Hargrove, the oldest person there, visibly twitch at the sight of it. And then comes the moment everyone fears, the seating. There are only 2 empty chairs. One is by the door, close enough to catch every breeze, when the maid comes in with the tea. The other, dangerously, sits near the fire, right next to you. He picks the fire. You smile because you have to. He sits down carefully, but not before catching your eye and giving the smallest, most self-aware look of apology. And that is where the problem starts. Because sitting next to someone near a winter fire even for 30 minutes is a type of closeness that no etiquette book can fully erase. It is unspoken, but everyone gets it. Shared heat suggests shared something else, maybe not love, but comfort, a sort of domestic preview. Your aunt's face tightens a tiny bit. Your sister lifts a teacup with fresh interest. Someone across the room coughs in a way that implies an opinion, not a sickness. And you do what you have been taught to do. You do not lean in, you do not move away. You stay perfectly still, eyes forward, gloved hands folded in your lap, your posture giving away nothing except the fact that you know exactly what is going on. Because in winter, especially in public, every look by the fire becomes a kind of dance step, and now you are in it. The fire snaps between you. You keep your eyes forward, your face calm, but your skin hums with the awkwardness of being close. Too close, and you risk looking familiar. Too stiff, and you will look flustered, an even worse crime in this house where subtlety is king and discomfort is a private language. The gentleman, Mr. Hensley, you remember now, fixes the cuff of his coat and says in a voice tuned exactly for polite conversation, "The roads from Richmond are almost blocked. I counted 3 carriages in ditches before noon." Your aunt makes a soft noise. "Terrible," she says, not looking up from her sewing. You give a calculated nod. "You must have left very early before breakfast," he answers, smiling slightly, "though I guess the scones I missed were worth less than this fireplace." A few laughs. Not yours. You hold back. But still, he spoke to you first. Not your sister, not your aunt. You. And now the room knows. Mrs. Hargrove leans a bit toward your mother and whispers something behind her cup. Your mother answers with a slight narrowing of the eyes, a quiet reminder that this room has ears sharper than ice on a window ledge. Mr. Hensley continues to warm his hands near the fire just a little closer than needed. It is not scandalous. It is not even wrong. But it is memorable, and that is what counts. You recall a story told last winter about 2 cousins who went to a card party and accidentally shared a foot warmer under the table. One got married 6 months later, the other was never asked back to the hostess's house. The line between closeness and mistake is razor thin. In a Victorian parlour, someone starts to pour tea. The tray has come your way and now comes a new danger, the trading of cups. Tea etiquette in winter is a silent war zone. The cup has to be taken without clumsiness. Gloves must be taken off only at the wrist. No steam can fog your glasses if you wear them. No cookie can crumble onto the rug. And above all, you must not look affected by the heat of the china. Your hands, still red from the bath, now cold again from the draught, hold the cup just so the saucer stays steady. You thank the poorer Lady Attlebridge with a rehearsed smile. Across the fire, Mr. Hensley watches you with a hint of curiosity. Not flirting, he would not dare. But something softer, a kind of amused respect maybe, as if he also knows you are threading the needle of rules. Your sister clears her throat, not sick, but a signal that it is time to move on. You nod, and together you stand up, walking over to look at the new Chinese figurine your aunt just bought. As you walk by, you feel the heat of the fire fall away from your dress like a lifted curtain behind you. Mr. Hensley stands up too. He does not follow. He knows better, but he stands until you are seated again. Later, in the carriage ride home, your sister says only that you sat rather near the fire. You look at her, then out the frosted window. It was the only chair. She smiles slightly. Of course, you say nothing else. Because in winter, when the days are short and the rooms are dark, It is not what is said out loud that defines a reputation. It is what is noticed in the flicker of firelight and carefully not discussed later. The frost gets thicker as evening comes, and the house shrinks inward as if curling into itself for warmth. But you have one more job today. Letters. Not the lazy notes of Sunday afternoons or the scribbled thank yous after dinner, but real winter letters, the kind you write in silence, sitting straight at a freezing desk with hands half numb, in gloves that you only take off finger by finger. You light the lamp next to your writing desk. The flame moves hesitantly, throwing long shadows across the ink bottle. The air smells of old paper, wax, polish, and a faint metallic taste from the window's icy breath. You pull the blanket tighter around your legs and move your fingers. There are 3 letters to write, one to your cousin in Dover, one to your mother's friend in Brighton, and one, most carefully, to a gentleman your aunt thinks might be interested. That last one is the real test. The other 2 are practice. You dip your pen into the ink, careful not to drip. The ink has gotten slow in the cold, and you have to warm the metal tip slightly between your fingers before it will flow. Your first line comes slowly. Dearest Eleanor, your hand shakes just a little, not from nerves, from cold. Letter writing in winter is an art of control. You must write warmly, but not too warmly, loving, but not clinging. Holiday greetings are expected naturally, but avoid being sentimental. Anything too happy will seem fake. Anything too sad, dramatic. And of course, there is the rule of ink. Black ink is correct. Blue is okay. Green is weird. Red is kept for debt collectors and dangerous women. Your aunt once gasped out loud when a letter arrived written in purple. A woman of loose morals, she said, and refused to reply. You finish Eleanor's letter with a short report of the frost fair. Not the cold, not the hurting feet, not the ruined gloves. Just the facts. The river froze solid. Booths were built. A man juggled oranges. You seal the letter with a sticker and press it shut. The second letter, to your mother's friend in Brighton, is shorter. You do not know her well. She's older, likes long paragraphs and longer opinions. You match her style, rambling but stiff. You mention your recent bath with great subtlety. The fire in the dressing room held nicely this week, which was a small mercy. She will understand. And then, the third letter, this one needs a pause. You have only met Mr. Linden twice, once at the New Year's lunch, once at church, but he remembered your name both times. He also critically noted, your gloves were trimmed in mother-of-pearl buttons. A rare detail, he had said. You were not sure if he meant it as a compliment or an inspection. Now, as you get ready to write, your breath clouds faintly in front of you. You dip the pen, hesitate, and start. Dear Mr. Linden, your kind words at the lunch have stayed with me longer than the smell of the pine wreaths, which have sadly started to dry and fall. You pause. Too poetic, maybe, but let it stay. The letter references the weather, the state of the carriage roads, a mutual friend's excessive use of coal. You fold it exactly, seal it in a clean envelope, and put it aside to be stamped tomorrow. 3 letters, 3 versions of yourself, all neatly stacked, silent, perfect. Because in winter, words are not just for warmth. They are for accuracy, for placement, for survival. You move your hand and reach for your gloves. There is still frost on the inside of the window. You blow gently on the sealed envelopes, watching the wax cool and harden into little domes of silence. They shine red under the lamp, proper, traditional, and just formal enough to carry meaning without risk. You arrange them in the mail tray by the door. In this house, even the act of sending a letter is part of the show. Back at your desk, the ink has started to crust at the edge of the well. You cap it neatly, wipe the pen tip, and fold away a writing cloth with the same care a servant might fold a burial sheet. There is something about winter letters. They always feel like confessions sewn into lace. From the hallway comes a faint noise. The footman is collecting outgoing mail. He never knocks, never says a word. You hear the soft sound of envelopes as they vanish into his bag, headed for the cold box at the end of the square. You imagine the long walk in the evening fog, the way the iron slot bites cold fingers. You wonder if Mr. Linden will read your letter by firelight or by gas lamp, and whether he will notice the loop in your capital G. The room gets quiet outside. A dog barks once. Further away, a distant carriage wheel slides briefly on the stones. You stretch your fingers, wincing. They are stiff again. The writing may be done, but the cold stays. Your sister appears in the doorway, cheeks pink, bonnet strings messy. "The lamp is out in the stairwell," she says. "I nearly broke my neck." You look up. "And did you manage to fall gracefully?" "Of course," she answers with a grin, but only because no one was watching. You both laugh, but softly. The room soaks up the sound like cloth. She steps in, warming her hands near the desk lamp. "Did you write him?" You know who she means. You nod. "Did you mention the snow?" "Briefly." "And the oranges?" "Good," she says. "That sounds sufficiently forgettable." You raise a brow. "Isn't forgettable the opposite of what I am aiming for?" She shrugs, the corners of her mouth moving. "Not if he is clever." She vanishes again, leaving only a trace of cool air and the smell of wool behind her. You sit for a while longer, watching the window. The frost has crept higher along the glass, feathering like some frozen plant. The candle flickers. You imagine the mailboy arriving at the box, breath visible, scarf damp with fog. You wonder if he reads the names on the letters, if he thinks about the stories tucked inside. There is something almost intimate about winter mail, how much you can say and how much more you must leave unsaid. A badly chosen word in summer may be forgiven, in winter it freezes in place. And of course the real trick is not the writing, it is waiting for the reply, waiting for the look, waiting to see whether your words will be returned to you, reflected in someone else's ink and sealed in someone else's wax. You slip your writing gloves back on and close the desk. Outside, the street is silent. The only light comes from the flickering gas lamps in the occasional window, glowing faintly like a heartbeat behind frost-covered glass. Your letter is out there now, and in a Victorian winter, that is as close as you are allowed to come to hope. The snow has stopped. That should be good news, but the stillness it leaves behind is heavier than noise, like the world has been pressed under a thick blanket of silence and expectation. You wake to that hush, the kind that covers more than rooftops. It settles on your shoulders the moment you dress, in the way no one speaks above a whisper, in the faint pressure behind every look. Today is a drawing room day. No outings, no errands, no walks. The world outside is sealed in white, and the fireplace becomes the centre of gravity. Everyone gathers in the parlour, not because they want to, but because they must. Winter draws you together like coals drawn into a single flame, reluctant, slow, and crackling. You arrive late enough that the fire has been built up and early enough to avoid the bad seats. You settle between the plant stand and the piano, a spot just warm enough to stop shivering, but far enough from the hearth to suggest modesty. Your mother is knitting something beige. She is always knitting in winter. The colour changes, but the rhythm does not. Your brother relaxes near the fire, one boot turned sideways, ignoring the stiffness in your mother's expression. Your aunt is fixing a cuff. Your sister flips through a magazine, not reading. No one reads in full on drawing room days. You skim, you comment, you gesture at articles like a seagull pecking crumbs. Then the conversation begins, slowly, and with all the grace of a bow on ice. "Did you hear about the Abernethys?" Your aunt starts. They have taken in a companion. That word companion hangs in the air like a snowflake too heavy to fall. "A widow?" your mother asks. "No," says your aunt, "a niece, though some say she is only called a niece." Your sister does not look up. Well, it is not as though the Abernethys ever cared about appearances. The fire snaps. You sip your tea. This is the ritual. The drawing room is not a place for rest. It is a performance hall. You must speak just enough to seem engaged, but never so much as to dominate. Your wit must be sharp, but not slicing. You're allowed an opinion, but only if it wears a bonnet and speaks in a lower voice. At a certain moment your cousin attempts to crack a joke, some remark concerning the milk turning to ice before it could even hit the tea. It fails to get a laugh. Your aunt responds with a glare that looks like it could curl fabric. You let your mind drift back to the soot mishap a few days prior when the chimney puffed smoke back into the room during the letter-writing hour. Nobody has mentioned it since that moment, yet you can sense the memory in the way your uncle refuses to sit anywhere near the fireplace. The drawing room holds onto these memories, not verbally, but through sharp glances, through cushions that feel stiff with tension, and in the way nobody leaves a spoon sitting on a saucer for more than a moment. A bit later, your sister whispers that her hands are freezing. Your mother tells her to put on her gloves, but I am inside the house. Then keep them folded, hold them together, find a way to occupy yourself. Freezing hands invite judgment. You slide your own hands underneath the blanket on your lap. You had not even noticed they had gone completely numb. You would assume that in a room packed with relatives you might feel seen. However, winter protocols are not regarding visibility, they are regarding correctness. You have to be present, yet never intrusive, elegant rather than expressive, poised rather than performative. Accept naturally that the entire thing is a performance. The fire pops loudly. Nobody flinches and you remain seated, composed and cautious, while your fingertips slowly turn invisibly cold. The clock ticks softly above the fireplace, every chime measuring your endurance rather than the time. Drawing room hours drag on, shiny, boring and as fragile as fine china. You have adjusted your position in the chair twice, each time calculating the shift to ensure it looks natural. If you are too still, you look moody. If you move too much, you look agitated. Both appear suspicious. Opposite you, your brother starts humming quietly, distractedly, some messy song from a music hall he really should not have gone to. Your aunt goes rigid. Your mother clears her throat loud enough to be heard. No actual words are spoken, yet the humming fades away. This is exactly how Victorian drawing rooms function, silent discipline delivered through a symphony of throat clearing. Your cousin drops her sewing needle and allows it to roll across the floorboards. She does not run after it. Chasing it would be improper. So instead, the maid is rung for, not by name, naturally, but with a delicate bell. The girl comes in, hair a bit frizzy from the heat of the kitchen, fingers red from scrubbing. She bends down to grab the needle, and for one breathless second you spot it, a burn scar on the back of her wrist. It looks old, pale, and shaped just like the corner of a flat iron. Your aunt says thank you, but she does not look at the girl. The servant leaves. The silence takes over again. Your sister shuts her magazine with a barely audible snap. This article proposes that gentlemen ought to start wearing lined waistcoats by the middle of December. I cannot help but feel we have gone past the point of mere suggestions. Your brother grins at that. My waistcoat is lined with pure ambition. It is not a clever joke, yet everyone chuckles because it is safer to humour a gentleman's mediocrity than to overlook it. You smile as well, properly, showing just enough teeth. And right then Mrs. Lockmere enters. She is late. She is perpetually late. She is wearing furs that are too heavy for being indoors and perfume that is too intense for a small room. But she carries gossip, and that is the currency here. I went by the Havisham house on my way here, she declares, arranging herself like a heroine in a play. They have covered all the windows. There are gasps, not of fear, but of excitement. Your mother leans in. Is someone sick? Mrs. Lockmere nods her head. The oldest son came back from Cambridge with a cough, a nasty one, and apparently she drops her volume. They have moved him to the rear of the house. No guests allowed. Your cousin clicks her tongue. Always so dramatic, those Havishams. It is likely just a sore throat, or something worse, your sister whispers. You know what a back room implies. Nobody replies, but everybody knows you are not supposed to say consumption. You are not supposed to say fever. Those are words reserved for physicians and undertakers. In polite circles, sickness is covered in euphemisms. He is resting. She is frail. They have taken a quieter room. It is not the disease that destroys reputations. It is the admission of the disease. You take a sip of your tea, which is cold now. You look at the fireplace, steady and indifferent. Someone brings up the piano. Would it be too bold to ask for a song? Maybe. Unless it is Chopin. Chopin is always a safe bet, sad, refined, asking for nothing. Your sister is requested to play. She does so quietly. Her gloved fingers drift like memories over the ivory keys. The melody fills the gaps between the glances, between the fears, between the voiced and unvoiced worries. When she stops, nobody applauds. They simply nod, because in the Victorian winter drawing room, clapping is too noisy. Approval ought to be folded up like linens and put away for later. You think about the Havisham boy. You think about his windows, shuttered and quiet. You adjust your shawl, even though you are already warm. Nobody talks about endings, only pauses. The first sign of the holidays arrives not with happiness but with pressure. It starts when your mother announces the wreath in the hallway is not good enough. Too dry, she claims, looking at the holly with a pinched face. It sends the incorrect message. You are not entirely sure what message a wreath is supposed to broadcast, but in this home, every twig, every ribbon, every slice of dried orange is a tool in the seasonal symphony of respectability. Christmas in a Victorian home is not regarding wonder or warmth, it is regarding presentation. The regulations of winter etiquette get stricter as the holiday approaches. The frost may get worse, but so must your hospitality. There has to be an atmosphere of cheer even if your fingers are numb, your boots are still wet, and your sister has not stopped coughing for 3 days. And so the house changes. You are called to help in the drawing room, the centre of this yearly production. There is garland to hang, but not too low, cards to set up on the mantel, starting with important contacts first, family second, and the tree needs to be trimmed with care. Every ornament is checked, every candle stub measured. You are given the fragile job of hanging the crystal stars. Because your hands are steady and more vitally your taste is disciplined, you nod obediently and start. The drawing room tree is nothing like the one in the servants' hall. That one is loud and colourful, covered in scraps of coloured paper and gingerbread shapes that show more excitement than skill. Yours is elegant, muted. There can be no clashing colours, no uneven spacing. Even the apples hanging from red silk strings must be polished. Your aunt watches from her armchair, holding a teacup. Gold goes on the left side, she instructs, never on the right. It catches the morning sun. You wonder if she realises the tree is nowhere near a window. Downstairs, you hear the noise of crates being pried open. More decorations, more candles, more evidence of plenty. But upstairs, everything needs to look effortless, as if the pine cones in the hall just fell into a symmetrical pattern, as if the satin bows tied themselves during the night. Once the tree is dressed, the fireplace is refreshed. Not too many logs. It must not look wasteful. Just enough fire to glow against the glass ornaments and throw soft shadows on the brass. A servant is sent to wipe down the candlesticks. Your mother moves the nativity figures so Mary never faces away from the visitors. Your sister fixes the tinsel, even though she has always said it looks like metal seaweed. Then comes the issue of the guest list. A paper is rolled out on the writing desk and names are argued over like chess pieces. Not the Percivals, your mother says. They served blancmange on cheap plates last year. "Certainly not," says your aunt. "And the Barretts are still getting over their niece's wedding. It is too soon to host them again. Your name is brought up only once, when someone asks if you have enough gloves to get through the week. You do. You always do." As the evening gets closer, your father shows up in the doorway, brushing pine needles off his sleeves. "Will we be hanging the token ribbons?" he asks, almost joking. Your mother blinks. "The token ribbons are for Christmas Eve." He gives a faint smile and backs away, whispering, "Ah, right, my mistake. You and your sister share a look because he forgets every single year." Later, as you sit next to the finished tree, its ornaments shining like polished etiquette, you wonder how much of this is really for celebration and how much is for inspection. In a Victorian winter, Christmas does not melt the rules. It sharpens them in silver and hangs them from every branch. By the time the guests show up for the holiday evening, the house has been turned into something that appears effortlessly festive. If you overlook the hours of planning behind every garland, sphere and ribbon draped over the banister, candles are lit with timing so exact it could be military. The fires are built up to a perfect glow and the air is thick with cinnamon, citrus and silent panic. You're wearing your winter best, a pine green dress with black velvet trim, gloves so new they squeak when you move your fingers, and a brooch borrowed from your mother's locked box. Just for tonight. You are told to stand near the parlour door to welcome arrivals with a smile warm enough for the season, but not so warm that it invites closeness. The doorbell chimes, and so it starts. Mr. and Mrs. Anstruther are first, smelling slightly of sherry and damp wool. Then the Holloways, whose daughter is rumoured to be engaged, although nobody has said it out loud. Each guest brings with them not just a coat and a calling card, but the potential for judgment. Whether their boots are shined, whether their children bow correctly, whether their breath creates fog when they talk, because that would imply they did not keep the carriage heated. Small talk begins with the same accuracy as the candle lighting. Bracing out there, isn't it? Yes, but not cruel. I do hope this cold lasts through the new year. A green Christmas is so uncertain. Your aunt starts the tour of the decorations as if showing off treasures in a museum. "The ribbons are real silk," she tells Mrs. Holloway, who nods without blinking. You can practically hear her estimating the price and wondering if hers will need to match up. In the drawing room, the tree stands tall and obedient in the corner, glowing gently under the lamps. The candles are lit just far enough apart to avoid looking cheap, but not so close together that they look dramatic. Your cousin stations himself by the piano with a book of carols, ready if asked, but never looking eager. You hover near the tea tray, passing out biscuits, with the calculated vibe of someone who has never once broken one in half by accident. Your gloves get sticky with crumbs, but you do not dare take them off. Your sister manages to excuse herself at exactly the right second, leaving you to handle the children, two small boys who have decided to hide under the sofa and giggle whenever Mrs. Anstruther leans forward. Your mother catches your eye from across the room. She gives a tiny nod, and you do the same back. The dance goes on. Then comes the unavoidable moment, the gift exchange. Every guest was told to bring a token, a candle, a card, something handmade or vaguely useful. It must not be expensive, but it must appear expensive. The illusion is the whole point. You hand over your package, a folded paper fan, delicately painted by your sister and tied with green ribbon, to Mrs. Holloway. She smiles with a stiffness that hints at mild confusion, maybe even offence. You wonder if she was expecting lace or something French. She gives you a bag of lavender tied in tulle. It smells a bit like soap and regret. A man near the fireplace gets a carved matchbox holder and pretends not to flinch. The boy next to him is handed a book of nature poems and stares at it like it is a punishment. But nobody complains, nobody sighs, everybody smiles. Because Christmas is not regarding joy, not here. It is regarding performing joy. convincingly enough that nobody dares to look behind the tinsel. Later, when the guests have left and the fire is dying down, your mother looks over the messy ribbons and dirty teacups with narrow eyes. "Well," she says, "I think it went beautifully." You say nothing. That is the right answer. In this season, silence is the most festive etiquette of all. By the time Christmas is over, the house settles into a weird rhythm. Slower, quieter, but more tense, as if everyone is waiting for the next frost to break something underneath them. It is in these days, after the holiday, that the cold really sinks into your bones. Not just the bones of the house, though. The windows breathe frost and the door frames have started to shrink, but yours too. And it is now, with the tree still wilting politely in the corner and the last of the mince pies going stale on the sideboard, that the whispers of dating start to get sharper. You hear it first, over tea, in that specific tone your aunt uses when she is building up to something dangerous. "Did you notice how Mr. Linden handed you the hymnal on Christmas Eve?" she says without looking up from her sewing. You look sideways. He was sitting right next to me. He could have passed it through your sister. He chose not to. You want to laugh, but you don't. Because in a Victorian winter, a gloved hand brushing another across the spine of a hymn book is enough to get 4 households whispering. The rules around winter courtship are specific. Flirting in summer can be playful, shaded walks, soft fans, and the occasional shared fruit at a picnic. But winter demands structure. There are no lingering walks down garden paths, no ballrooms full of candlelight and excuses. Instead, there are drawing rooms, heavy with coal smoke, and eyes that watch every move as though they are writing down confessions for later reference. That afternoon a note comes, not a letter. A note folded neatly, delivered by a footman, addressed by hand in a script you cannot mistake. Mr. Linden requests permission to visit. You do not blush. You do, however, carefully fix your posture so your mother will not think you are expecting anything. She reads the note out loud, then reads it again, silently. "He writes with a steady hand," she murmurs, as if that proves the state of his soul. And then, without asking you, she says, "We will receive him on Thursday. You will wear the plum." The plum refers to a dress you got last winter. Wool, modest neckline, buttons of jet. It is not your favourite, but it sits correctly at the waist and makes your shoulders look narrower, which apparently is important. Thursday comes with white snow. Not enough to cancel the visit, but enough to sharpen the mood. The drawing room is set like a trap. Fresh coals, polished silver, a strategically placed book of Cowper's poems next to the sofa. You are told not to sit down until he gets there. Positioning is everything. You are to enter after he is announced. Not before, not too soon, not too slowly. Mr. Linden arrives exactly on the hour, his boots brushed clean, his scarf dusted with snow like powdered intent. He bows appropriately deep, and you curtsy in response. And then silence. The maid pours tea. You offer the plate of biscuits. He takes one. Everyone waits. "Well," he says, "London is pale today." Your mother replies with a smile. It does tend toward grey this time of year. You watch him. He is seated just across from you, not too close, not too far. His gloves rest on the table. You cannot help but see one finger is frayed slightly at the seam. Fraying is forgivable if it is subtle. You fold your hands in your lap and offer your best neutral smile. The game has started. Your sister later describes it as the most awkward half-hour I have ever witnessed, without anyone actually bleeding. But during the visit itself, nobody acknowledges the tension that would be rude. Instead, everyone leans heavily on the accepted etiquette of winter courtship visits. After his comment on the weather, Mr. Linden makes a second attempt. "The holly in your window box still looks lively," he says, and you nod politely, even though it is actually quite dead and was secretly replaced yesterday. "You keep it well," he adds. "I don't keep it," you reply with a smile. I merely admire it. Your aunt, seated with embroidery she isn't stitching, lets out a low sound. That might be approval or indigestion, or both. The whole visit moves forward in this ritualized dance. Measured glances, phrases polished by the cold, long pauses during which the fire crackles helpfully to fill the silence. No personal feelings may be shown, no hands may be offered. If a gentleman has intentions, he must offer them, not with words, but with hints. He does not ask about your interests, but he does say there is a perfect performance of Handel's Messiah next Friday. I find the altos particularly moving. This is an invitation in Victorian terms, you reply. Yes, the altos do sound rather like heartbreak softened by snowfall. This is an acceptance delivered poetically, naturally, to keep plausible deniability. He leaves before the half-hour mark, as is proper. The footman takes his coat. Your aunt remarks once he is gone, his boots were a bit short in the toe. Unmarried men often misjudge their own length. You want to scream. Instead, you go to the window and watch him step back into the street, his figure shrinking into the fog. You wonder whether his fingers are cold, or if his heart is as tightly buttoned as his coat. The next day, a small package arrives. It is not from Mr. Linden, it is from his sister, a soft token gesture of interest, a ribbon bookmark sewn with your initials, hand-stitched, precise. This is not a gift, this is a message. You are seen. You are now part of the circle. You are expected to reply with something equally modest, something with thought, but not too much thought. A bag of lavender, maybe. A calling card placed slightly crooked to show a human hand. The rules of winter courtship are not written, but they are enforced. If you stray from the sequence, you signal impropriety, or worse, desperation. Evening falls. You sit by the fireplace with your embroidery, the little bookmark resting on the table beside your tea. You have not replied yet. That would be too fast. It is essential to appear unhurried, even if your thoughts are pacing in circles. Your sister speaks softly from the armchair. Do you like him? You hesitate. I don't know. That is probably ideal, she says. Liking someone makes all this far too dangerous. You laugh, but quietly, because she is right. In a Victorian winter, affection is a flame you hide in your pocket, kept close, fed in secret, never exposed to the cold air of reality. Courtship is not a romance. It is a dance performed on frost-bitten marble with gloves on, under supervision. And you are learning the steps. Morning begins not with sunlight, but with a draft. It slides under your door, pulls at your blankets, and reminds you none too gently that the festive season may be past, but the true winter has only just arrived. The windows rattle faintly in their frames, the glass rimmed with a fuzz of ice so fine it looks like lace. You rise cautiously, knowing what awaits. Household accounts day. It happens every January. The ledgers come out, the pens are sharpened, the fire is fed a little less generously because this is the season not of fun but of accounting. You shuffle into the breakfast room to find your mother already seated at the long table, glasses balanced on the tip of her nose, ledgers fanned out like battle plans. She does not look up. The coal bill is higher than last year. You pour tea. It was colder. We had guests more frequently. Guests require heat. You don't answer. There is no defence against math. January etiquette dictates that household economies must tighten, but with grace. The trick is to appear unchanged. The drawing room must still gleam. The silver must still shine. The parlour fire must still be lit before the first footman dares to yawn. But elsewhere, behind closed doors, sacrifices begin. Servants are let go quietly with references. One of the housemaids is suddenly off visiting her aunt. She will not return. Candles are burned lower. Dinners become simpler. Roast beef becomes mutton. Mutton becomes stew. And always there is the ledger. You are expected to take part not in the actual sums, heavens no, but in the aesthetic of thrift. You fold old ribbons for reuse. You suggest that your cousin's worn gloves might be charmingly rustic if rehemmed. When your father raises an eyebrow at the idea of skipping sweet courses on Wednesdays, you say, "It is rather French, isn't it?" Restraint. He seems pleased by that. He has always been suspicious of overindulgence since the goose fat incident. There is also Inventory Day, which involves the most delicate of dances, determining which gifts received during the holidays can be quietly repurposed. A scarf too bold in colour might suit a cousin in Shropshire. A box of sugared violets could be rewrapped and passed to a family with fewer scruples about expiration. You assist with the labelling, using the slanted handwriting you reserve for polite deception. Your mother holds up a pair of lace-edged handkerchiefs. Too romantic, you nod, suggests intimacy. She places them in the basket marked for friends with sons. There is a certain bleak comedy to it. All the way January forces you to rehearse humility. You feign simplicity while frantically maintaining the look of things. It is like pretending to be destitute inside a theatre constructed of fine mahogany. And yet you grasp the concept. The etiquette of winter insists on it. It is not merely the frozen hard smile, or the kind, withheld pleasantries, but the total mask of control to seem undaunted, completely untouched by the bite of the season. Because the second you appear chilled or hungry or worried, people whisper, and even worse, they remember. So you sit by your mother, counting up the unseen costs of December, acting as if you do not see that the coals in the parlour are already burning down low. As the cold weather deepens and the days stay stubbornly grey, the etiquette of winter moves from a public show to a private resilience. The parties have faded away, the guests return to their icy estates, and now only the household is left, navigating the long, lean span of January with a stiff upper lip and a quietly fraying hemline. Behind the closed doors, the family grows more hushed. The silence is not exactly unpleasant, just thin. Conversations become shorter. Laughter feels like physical work. Even the cat appears to walk more gently, as if she is also saving her body heat. And alongside the quiet comes a fresh attention to the unwritten laws of winter conduct. This is the season for graceful austerity, not poverty. Heavens, no. But the appearance of prudence. To be seen enjoying oneself too much too openly in January would brand a family as tasteless, perhaps even vulgar. And so the art of doing less while pretending you prefer it becomes a full-time job. You have taken to writing letters in the morning, not from inspiration, but from obligation. Letters must still be mailed. Alliances have to be kept. Your tone is light, yet thoughtful. You thank a cousin for the dried oranges, ignoring the fact that they arrived with mould. You compliment an acquaintance on a musical recital, even though you fell asleep halfway through the performance. Every phrase is selected with care to imply that your household remains serene, stable, and socially flawless. Your mother makes her own gestures. She mends handkerchiefs in front of the staff only once a week, just long enough to imply frugality, without seeming desperate. She cuts back the sugar in the tea, commenting that it is quite the Parisian trend, even though you both know it is because the last order was short. Modest breakfasts replace the lavish ones. Toast takes over for crumpets. Butter becomes scarce. The marmalade is stretched out with a whisper of water. The cook is not amused by this. The parlour games, once a nightly ritual, now rotate through a tighter circle. You have played so much charades you have started dreaming in mime. Your sister tries a game of consequences and ends up with a story involving a bishop, 3 cats, and a scandalous misunderstanding. A misunderstanding about an umbrella makes you laugh until your tea goes cold. That night, you slide into bed wearing socks, not for style, but because the fire was only lit for an hour and the sheets feel like glass. And still you remind yourself that others are colder. To complain would be impolite. Even your dreams start to mirror the season. You find yourself wandering down endless hallways lined with coat hooks, looking for gloves you know you have already lost. In the dream, someone keeps whispering about coal rations. You wake up, feeling slightly ashamed. One evening, as the wind whistles through the chimney, your father quietly remarks that a season like this separates the dignified from the merely wealthy. It is a strange compliment and a warning, because in this world elegance is not proven by what you own, but by how little you seem to need. So you sip weak tea, write strong sentences, and learn to look cheerful by candlelight, because the Victorian winter is not survived with warmth, it is endured with composure. And you're becoming a master of it. You do not notice the first signs of the thaw in the garden. They arrive quietly, meltwater threading down the edges of the lead-paned windows, a subtle drip from the eaves, a scent that is not quite snow anymore. It is still cold, of course, but now the cold feels wet rather than brittle. The iron edge of midwinter has dulled. You are in the morning room when your sister gasps. The crocuses are coming, and sure enough, a few brave green shoots have pushed through the frost-clogged soil beneath the yew hedge. It is absurd, really. Nothing else has changed. The wind still nips your ears, the drawing-room fire still sulks with damp coal, and yet that small patch of stubborn life sends a ripple through the house. Spring is not here exactly, but it has been glimpsed. And that changes everything, because in Victorian society, the tail end of winter is as socially delicate as a souffle. The rules begin to shift slowly but decisively, just as tightly laced as before, but now tinged with expectation. Conversations are lighter, calling cards are dropped off with more hopeful curls at the corner, the housemaid hums while scrubbing the stair rail. Even your mother unpacks a bolt of pale muslin and runs a fingertip along it as if testing sunlight. But here is the trick. You must not leap too soon. One of the cardinal sins of Victorian etiquette is appearing too eager for seasonal change. To pack away your winter furs before Lady Martin Marchbanks does is practically a declaration of social rebellion. So everything must shift slowly, politely, and above all, collectively. Your gloves are still grey wool, but you switch to a narrower wrist. Your bonnet stays velvet, but now has fewer feathers, and the coal scuttle is only filled to the halfway mark, just in case someone might notice. Oversupply. The afternoon calls begin again. Not the lavish holiday visits of December. These are different, briefer, more pointed. The intent now is to signal availability, a kind of slow social unfreezing. The frost, both literal and figurative, is lifting. One such call arrives from the Lindens. Not Mr. Linden himself this time, but his sister and her companion. They arrive with hands pink from the chill and cheeks full of unspoken assessments. You serve tea and lemon cake. No one mentions the weather. Instead, Ms. Linden remarks, "We hear the concert series at Almack's may begin early this year." You nod. "That depends on whether the March fogs agree." She smiles. "I have always thought fog was more stubborn than frost." It is a harmless comment and a loaded one, because fog here means uncertainty. It means delay. It means the lingering grip of winter on hearts that may or may not yet be ready to declare themselves. After they leave, your sister muses. "I think she meant that as a challenge, you agree." But what exactly is being challenged remains delicately undefined. That evening, your father surprises you by discussing calendar dates over soup. If the frost does not return, he says, we will host a dinner the second week of March. You almost drop your spoon. That is early and ambitious, but you nod because you understand what is really happening. It is not just a dinner, it is the opening move. Preparations begin almost in secret, not because anything is being hidden, but because to be seen preparing too eagerly would be vulgar. So the servants are instructed softly behind half-closed doors. Menus are whispered, not declared, and when you are caught sketching table arrangements on scrap paper, you immediately claim it is just an idle scribble. But everyone knows the household is slowly winding up like a great wooden clock, each cog polished, each movement rehearsed, yet all under a veil of restraint because Victorian spring etiquette is not about welcoming warmth with open arms. It is about testing the ice with one foot while pretending you never cared for skating anyway. The drawing room is freshened. Nothing dramatic, just a few green sprigs tucked into silver vases where holly once stood. Your mother swaps the winter curtains with ones of paler damask. The effect is subtle, like a sigh. Then comes the wardrobe. Oh, the exquisite agony of deciding how soon is too soon to wear lawn and muslin. Your winter gowns still hang in the armoire, heavy with velvet and solemnity, but you eye the lighter fabrics folded neatly on the shelf above each one, a whisper of coming brightness. You begin to make small substitutions, a lace collar on a wool dress, a silk ribbon in place of velvet. The rules allow this, provided it is done with discretion. Transition dressing, they call it, like nature, shedding bark in favour of blossom. Your father oversees the wine inventory. Your aunt insists the punch bowl be polished just in case, though she pretends to sneeze violently every time she leans too close to the silver polish. And when the dinner invitations go out, they are penned not in bold ink, but in the pale grey-green shade reserved for early spring affairs, a colour meant to say we are hopeful, not hasty. The guest list is precise. Not too long, lest it look like a celebration. Not too short, lest it feel like desperation. A good balance of families with eligible sons and daughters, enough musical talent to fill a lull, one or two eccentrics for seasoning. The morning of the dinner frost returns, just a whisper of it, a final warning. You feel it in the air as you walk to the conservatory, a chill that bites the inside of your nostrils, the kind of cold that mocks optimism. The cook mutters something dire about puddings falling. A footman slips on the steps and swears under his breath, earning a swift reprimand and a louder apology. But the plan does not change, because now it would be far worse to cancel. That would suggest fear, and Victorian etiquette despises fear. So the fires are stoked higher, the coals are brought out in full force, despite last week's thrift. You wear your gown with a warm shawl draped just so, implying style rather than survival. And when the guests arrive, their cheeks are redder, their laughs more brittle. But no one admits they are cold. At dinner, Mr. Linden sits across from you. He wears a dark cravat with a green pin, subtle, but spring, like his gloves, are thinner than last time. He says, "Only it is good to see your household in such strong spirits." You smile and lift your glass. "It is remarkable," you reply, "what one can accomplish with good firewood and bad weather." Laughter follows. The candles flicker outside. Winter growls once more. But in here, you have survived it with style. And then, quite suddenly, it is over. You wake one morning and the frost is gone. Not thinned or softened, but truly vanished. The garden wall glistens, and not with ice, but with dew. The sky, though pale, holds a tone of blue that has not been seen in months. And somewhere, faint, incredulous, a bird is singing. You do not dare smile too quickly. Victorian etiquette, after all, frowns upon triumph. But as you sit at breakfast, nibbling a slice of toast that no longer tastes like rationing, you catch your sister's eye. And there it is, shared between you, relief. Surviving a Victorian winter is not about wool or coal or boiled beef. It is about appearances, dignity, the tireless preservation of a facade that says we are not rattled by hardship. And now that performance can finally rest your mind. Mother declares it is time to air out the linen. The servants move through the halls with windows flung wide, sun pouring in like a long-lost guest. You hear laughter echoing down the corridor, not the polite kind, but something looser, almost undisciplined. It is alarming and beautiful. You step outside. For months the garden paths were treacherous, the hedges skeletal, the fountain nothing but an ice lump under a tarp. But now life peeks out everywhere. Snowdrops cluster beside the path. A gardener whistles as he overturns the cold earth, unearthing the first earthworms of the season. Your shawl slips. You do not bother adjusting it. There is a kind of lawlessness to these first days of spring. The rules are not gone, but they are stretched, loosened, worn at the edges. Everything feels both familiar and raw, like returning to a room you once lived in but have not visited in years. Inside, the drawing room is being rearranged. Winter furniture, a bit heavier, more plush, is being covered, stored, replaced with chairs that suggest lightness. The piano is retuned. A fresh bouquet of daffodils sits in the hall, replacing the holly that lingered longer than anyone wanted to admit. Your father is reviewing the social calendar. Your aunt is arguing with the cook about whether lemon syllabub should be served on porcelain or glass. And you find yourself standing before the hall mirror, not to check your hair, but to study your face, to see what winter has left behind. There are no visible changes, and yet you feel altered. You endured a season of ice-bound pleasantries, dwindling candles, careful conversations, and boiled puddings. You navigated flirtations under mistletoe, managed glances across frozen courtyards, held your posture while your teeth chattered. You survived Victorian winter, and you are not the same girl who greeted it. You are sharper now, gentler in some places, harder in others. You know what it means to smile when you are freezing, to offer tea when you are tired, to carry yourself with elegance when everything aches. Outside, a coach arrives. It is the first of many. The social thaw has begun in earnest. You recognise the Linden family crest, and you do not bother feigning surprise. You cross the hall with practised ease, lift your chin and prepare to greet the guests. Spring is here, but you are no longer simply waiting for warmth. You are the one who welcomes it in. The drawing room fills with voices again. They echo, brighter now, less constrained by cold smoke and cold toes. There is music too, not the brooding piano pieces of December, but lilting, hopeful melodies plucked on harp and fiddle. Someone jokes about surviving the siege of January. Laughter erupts, not polite titters, but something fuller, something that finally lets go. Ms. Linden arrives in pale green, her gloves so thin they are practically ornamental. A risky move, sartorially, but no one calls it out. Instead, you offer her tea and quietly acknowledge her audacity with the subtlest of smiles. It is spring. The rules may be intact, but their enforcement is softening, like the soil beneath your boots. Later that evening, your sister insists on stepping into the garden. "I want to feel it," she says. The not winter. So you go, cloaks over gowns, boots crunching over paths still littered with the memory of frost. The sky is streaked with dusk, purple and gold. A few brave buds dangle from the plum tree, and overhead the crows seem confused by the softness of the air. You walk silently for a while until she says, "It is funny. We did everything properly, all the rules, the teas, the calls, the dressing gowns, the ice etiquette." You glance at her and she shrugs, smiling, and we are still standing. That is when it hits you. It was not the fires that kept you warm. It was not the boiled puddings, or the stiffly worded thank you notes, or even the layers of lace and velvet. It was the rituals, the rhythm, the knowing that everyone else was obeying the same strange little dance, that no matter how cold or hungry or bored or lonely, there were rules to follow. And in following them, you remained anchored. Etiquette was not a cage, it was a raft. Now, as the season shifts, you know the rules will change again. The visiting hours will lengthen, the acceptable sleeve lengths will shorten, the garden parties will multiply like rabbits. And before you know it, you'll be standing at someone's summer fete, sipping elderflower cordial and pretending not to judge the state of their trellises. But for now, you exhale a real breath. No steam, just air. The house is behind you, the garden ahead. The rules of spring are still unwritten, but you are ready. You endured the hush, and the hush returned the favour. And when next winter rolls around, because it will, you will face it again. Maybe with a new pair of gloves, maybe with new heartbreak, or a new crush, or a better brand of tea, but always with the same quiet grace Victorian winters demand. Because now you know the secret. In the end, it is not about looking perfect. It is about looking unbothered. Even when your toes are frozen, your suitor is clueless and the coal scuttle is empty, and somehow you made it look easy. So now just settle into the quiet. You have walked through creaking hallways, sat stiffly at drafty dinner tables, and learned how to nod at gossip while sipping cold tea with a steady hand. You have endured layers of velvet, gritted your teeth through frostbitten mornings, and smiled through silences so long they almost counted as conversations. And you did it with grace, even if your gloves were threadbare, even if the plum pudding was more soot than fruit, even if you secretly preferred spring dresses. All along you were there, in that long, strange, breath-held season where warmth was rare but civility never wavered. You followed every rule that did not quite make sense. Because in that world, etiquette was not about being fancy. It was about surviving together, about showing up again and again with your buttons done and your manners intact. And now the fire has gone low, the lamp flickers, the windows rattle softly with the last sighs of the season. It is over, and so your body relaxes, your breath deepens. The long Victorian winter fades behind you, replaced by something lighter, looser, warmer. Not just outside, but inside you too. Because now you know you do not need spring to feel at peace. You just need a little quiet, a little kindness, and a hot brick wrapped in flannel tucked under your feet. Sleep well, dear listener. You have earned it.